Emperor intent. Zhao Feng stood motionless as his hair blew in a weird rhythm. The clouds above him summoned lightning that descended onto the earth, and his purple soul sea became pure and whole. His mental energy seemed to merge with heaven and earth, and its laws became far clearer. This was the peak void god realm level of a soul, where the soul reached completion. If the soul of a normal king was a rock, then the soul of an emperor was a crystal. Although the quantity of the soul didn't have much difference, there was a large difference in quality. At this moment in time, the appearance of a new emperor intent caused the majority of the dark clouds above the sky-sacred Qin palace to fade away. Emperor intent! The palace master, Li Shui, and company gazed at Zhao Feng with joyful and respectful eyes. This meant that Zhao Feng would have no bottleneck in becoming an emperor. Within a maximum of 10 years, Zhao Feng would become a new emperor of the Tsang Ocean. One had to know that the Tsang Ocean hadn't had a new emperor in the last several hundred years. The birth of an emperor could greatly change the situation anywhere. As I thought, I couldn't stop him. The Emperor of Death's calm face finally showed some solemnness. Emperor of Death. Who knows who shall die at whose hands? Zhao Feng's eyes were filled with confidence and battle intent. As soon as he finished speaking, he reached out with one hand and covered the sky with a flaming mist that glittered with gold. A burning claw of wind lightning seemed to cover the sky as it smashed toward the Emperor of Death. The Emperor of Death snickered coldly as the death force field around him started to twist and turn, sending a wave of death forward that turned everything in its path into dust. Bam! Boom! The nearby mountains seemed to evaporate into thin air. Pong! The burning wind lightning claw started to weaken as it met the wave of death. It only had 40% of its strength remaining by the time it got close to the Emperor of Death. The Emperor of Death unleashed his intent, and a sticky dark dimension of death appeared. Crack! Zhao Feng's imperial power was instantly engulfed. This is the domain of death, and it can even be called a small little world, the child demigod exclaimed. Zhao Feng also felt the unparalleled force of a little world. It was many times stronger than normal spatial domains. Scarlet Destruction Exploding Fist. Zhao Feng was now on an entirely new level, and his 3 domains clashed head-on with the Emperor of Death's little world. Having Emperor intent allowed Zhao Feng's Scarlet Destruction Wind Lightning to become much stronger, and it also allowed his 3 spatial dimensions to become more corporeal. The 3 domains representing his soul, bloodline, and technique all gathered together into the Golden Punch and released amidst a storm of ice and illusions. The child demigod radiated a golden light and seemed to become a Buddha as he used his heaven-sealing 18 palms to suppress the Emperor of Death. The combined forces of the two reached an entirely new level that could even push back normal emperors. Boom! Boom! Bam! The Emperor of Death pointed with his finger, and a whirlpool started to form from the power of his little world of death. It was like an abyss that was able to engulf any and every power. The attacks of the child demigod and Zhao Feng behaved as if they were stones sinking into the ocean. With a weird shoo sound, the Emperor of Death's simple pointing with his finger caused the space to tremble slightly as the power of his little world of death thundered toward Zhao Feng and the child demigod. Zhao Feng and the child demigod were suppressed by the force, and a coldness started to spread across their bodies. Not good. The two hiccuped coldly as they felt a terrifying suction force coming from the little world of death. All life force and essences were being engulfed and devoured. Zhao Feng and the child demigod both felt as if they were losing their life. Arg! Many members of the Sky Sacred Qin Palace inside the protective array turned into piles of white bones. Lightning wings flying technique. A pair of wings formed behind Zhao Feng's back. One could see the outline of a bone structure there, as if it was a pair of wings from an ancient bird of lightning. Shwa! Zhao Feng took the child demigod and instantly flashed away several hundred yards in the blink of an eye. If it weren't for the fact that Zhao Feng had formed Emperor intent, he wouldn't have been able to instantly fly so far while holding someone. Where do you think you're going? The Emperor of Death seemed to become the shadow of death as he closed in on the two. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the three had exited inland and reached the area outside. Those from the Sky Sacred Qin Palace only saw 2 flashes of light that shot into the sky and disappeared. Only the palace master could use her divine sense to see the battle in the limitless ocean. The scarlet red-colored lightning was Zhao Feng and the child demigod. The Emperor of Death is this fast? Zhao Feng realized that the Emperor of Death was able to catch up to him easily. One had to know that Zhao Feng was slightly faster than even some Void God Realm emperors because the increase in his intent allowed him to comprehend the core essence of the wings of wind and lightning. Master, we can't defeat the Emperor of Death as of right now, the child demigod said solemnly. Zhao Feng's eyes twinkled, but he didn't disagree. The Emperor of Death had easily suppressed the entire Sky Sacred Qin Palace right from the beginning. All his aspects had reached the limits of an emperor. At least at the moment, Zhao Feng wasn't able to figure out a way to deal with the Emperor of Death's immortal death body. Just this fact alone meant that the Emperor of Death was undefeatable. On top of that, Zhao Feng and the child demigod weren't able to handle the Emperor of Death's death force field or his little world. The Emperor of Death is extremely strong, and I will definitely lose if the fight drags out, Zhao Feng decided, and his wings fluttered even more quickly. Shua! Under the orders of Zhao Feng, the child demigod entered the ancient metal ring. What happened next was shocking. Lightning wings spatial flash. The wings behind Zhao Feng glowed with a brilliant light as his speed reached the maximum, and he seemed to merge into space. Whoosh! The Emperor of Death was only able to sense a faint bolt of lightning, and there was no sign of Zhao Feng within several thousand miles. Lightning wings spatial flash? That's the highest level of the wind-lightning inheritance. The Emperor of Death was slightly dazed. The technique Zhao Feng just used was the highest level of the wings of wind and lightning, the lightning wings spatial flash. This technique merged the lightning wings flying technique with the lightning wings wind flash to release extreme speed. In the blink of an eye, Zhao Feng appeared several thousand miles away. This speed was enough to leave most emperors in dust. The Wind-Lightning Emperor wasn't called the fastest emperor for nothing. Back then, he managed to escape even from sacred lords. My speed in the limitless ocean is more than 10 times faster than inland. Several thousand miles isn't good enough. Zhao Feng wasn't very satisfied. This meant that he would only be able to flash several hundred miles if he was inland, whereas the Wind-Lightning Emperor could easily flash more than 1,000 miles even inland. As expected, such speed wasn't enough to throw off the Emperor of Death. Death Instant Shadow. The Emperor of Death turned into a dark streak of light as he used a powerful spatial technique too. As the Emperor of Death got closer, lightning wings spatial flash. The wings behind Zhao Feng released another brilliant glow of light and merged into the air. This time, he traveled 1,000 miles further than before. After obtaining Emperor Intent, Zhao Feng's understanding of space reached an entirely new level, so he was able to use the lightning wings spatial flash as he pleased. Extreme speed plus absolute intent created the glory of the fastest emperor. Half the time it took to make tea later, Zhao Feng became more familiar with the lightning wings spatial flash and was able to minimize the amount of energy he used while also becoming faster. By the end, Zhao Feng could flash 7,000 or 8,000 miles at once. Of course, there was still a difference between him and the Wind-Lightning Emperor, but Zhao Feng's lightning wings spatial flash made him one of the fastest people below the Sacred Lord level. An hour later, the distance between Zhao Feng and the Emperor of Death began to steadily grow bigger. Lightning wings spatial flash, the highest level of flying that the fastest emperor had back then. The Emperor of Death's eyebrows furrowed together, and he felt somewhat helpless. He had heard of the Wind-Lightning Emperor before this emperor had once escaped from even sacred lords. Eventually, the Emperor of Death's divine sense lost track of Zhao Feng, and he could only follow him from the remaining aura left behind. Luckily for him, Zhao Feng was unable to recreate the aura of the lightning wings spatial flash, so he couldn't create any diversions. The lightning wings spatial flash condensed a lot of wind lightning and would create a large disturbance in space. Zhao Feng felt helpless about this as well. He needed to increase the distance between them first if he wanted to recreate his lightning wings wind flash to trick the Emperor of Death. The problem was that Zhao Feng's speed wasn't exactly overwhelming. He was only slightly faster than the Emperor of Death, and the Emperor of Death had a large amount of true yuan, allowing him to use the Death Instant Shadow several times. Over the limitless ocean, the two extreme speeds and auras made the experts passing by feel cold and become unable to breathe. 5 or 6 days later, Zhao Feng finally managed to escape from the Emperor of Death and enter a new island zone. Whoosh! An arc of lightning fell down from the sky like a meteor and landed on an island similar to the Azure Flower continent. Zhao Feng took a deep breath. His face was white and he was slightly staggering. He quickly sat down, took out a fruit from the ancient dream realm, and ate it. The area Zhao Feng entered was called the Bright Flower Area, and it was about the same rank as the Azure Flower continent. Boom! A several thousand-yard-wide crater formed when he landed because of the power of his wings of wind and lightning. Zhao Feng's face was pale white, and his aura was weak. He first ate a fruit from the ancient dream realm. If one was running low on true yuan or yuan qi, the fruits from the ancient dream realm were extremely effective, but they took a while to digest. However, Zhao Feng had already used his spiritual pills and treasures to replenish his energy while running. The essence contained within the fruit was closer to the origin of existence, and it had an extremely good effect on one's body and organs. It was countless times better than the ancient dream realm aura. After obtaining Emperor Intent, Zhao Feng could absorb the ancient dream realm fruit at a quicker rate than before, and he no longer needed to worry about his foundation being unstable. At this moment in time, his every action and breath sucked in a stream of heaven-earth yuan qi to replenish his true yuan dimension. When one's intent became stronger, they could recover at a faster rate, and the 10,000 ancient races' bloodlines' recovery speed was several times better than normal bloodlines. Within a day's time, Zhao Feng recovered most of his yuan qi and energy, and his cultivation even became a bit stronger after eating the fruit. Zhao Feng also circulated the 10,000 divine thoughts technique and multitasked. More than 100 strange wisps of lightning symbols appeared in his purple soul sea. Their auras were gloomy and they glittered with a dark light. These lightning symbols connected with each other, forming a sort of circuit. After gaining a deeper understanding of the God Tribulation lightning intent and forming Emperor intent, Zhao Feng could slowly start to use this power properly. However, the recovery speed of the God Tribulation lightning was very slow, so Zhao Feng needed to be careful when he used it. I'll wait till I have several hundred wisps. At that point, it'll be much more of a threat to the Emperor of Death. If I can absorb more than 1,000 wisps, I'll be unrivaled against everyone below the mystic light realm. Zhao Feng's eyes twinkled. At the moment, only the Scarlet Destruction Eye Flame could threaten the Emperor of Death's immortal death body and barely cause some damage. God Tribulation Lightning, Wings of Wind and Lightning, Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning. Zhao Feng had 3 directions in his mind that could increase his strength. The Wings of Wind and Lightning were very important since they were about speed. Zhao Feng also had 2 other thoughts, comprehending the Lightning Wing Spatial Flash and comprehending the Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning. With the formation of Emperor Intent, Zhao Feng's comprehension speed increased dramatically, and any bottlenecks from before were easily broken through. While Zhao Feng was cultivating, he didn't know that his arrival strongly impacted the Bright Flower Area. Whoosh! 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 The sound of flying appeared and headed toward the crater where Zhao Feng was staying. Right there. Something descended from the heavens there. Apparently, it's a never-before-seen meteorite, and it had a beautiful glow of lightning to it. The force of the impact was probably enough to kill a sovereign. Some of the figures in the air said to one another. Zhao Feng was like a lightning-filled meteorite as he descended from the limitless ocean. In the eyes of the various forces, this was an omen from the heavens. It might be a rare stone from the outside world or some kind of treasure. However, there was an enormous aura in the 1,000-yard-wide crater that made nearby beings unable to get close. The sound of flying then came from another few directions. The weakest of those arriving were at the True Lord rank, while the strongest had reached the late-stage Small Origin Core realm. The situation within the Bright Flower continent was similar to the Azure Flower continent. There were no Void God realm kings. The strongest clan here was only 1.5 stars. Therefore, everyone that had come over were the peak experts of the place. What a powerful force of heaven and earth! These peak experts felt an unblockable force of heaven and earth when they got close, and clouds of wind lightning appeared in the air. This doesn't seem like some sort of treasure. There were around 20 inland experts here, but they were unable to reach within 200 miles of the crater. These experts hadn't even seen Void God Realm Kings before. In reality, this was all caused by Zhao Feng's mental energy. But none of these experts imagined such a thing because the power and magnificence of it had exceeded their knowledge. Even my spiritual sense has been suppressed. An Origin Core Realm sovereign managed to reach 100 miles and felt unable to breathe. The Cultivation Zhao Feng sensed the figures closing in, but he didn't bother with them. He wanted to increase his cultivation as quickly as possible, so he needed to use Emperor Intent. This meant that such a scene would show up no matter where he went, but none of the experts could reach within 1,000 yards of Zhao Feng. Just the force of his cultivation alone made anyone below a sovereign lord unable to get close. As expected, none of these inland experts were able to reach within 100 miles of him, and they were unable to sense Zhao Feng's existence. 3 days later, with Emperor Intent, cultivating is indeed different. Zhao Feng ate another fruit. In the forests of the ancient Dream Realm, more than 20 fruits on the tree were guarded by Zhao Feng's pets, the snake and the bird. Zhao Feng first took down the riper fruits, and his cultivation was starting to close in on the middle stage Void God Realm. He estimated that if he cultivated in peace for another 2 months and ate 10 more fruits, he would reach the middle stage of the Void God Realm. Emperor Intent greatly increased cultivation speed. Master, if I eat one of those spiritual fruits, my golden Kuan sacred body might be able to enter the low mastery stage, and I'll be able to recover my strength quickly. If I get some more resources, I won't be far off the middle stage Void God Realm. The child demigod's voice sounded. He realized that this fruit that had the aura of the ancient dream realm was dozens of times better than other spiritual fruits. The child demigod was extremely smart and made his request when Zhao Feng was in danger. Under normal situations, Zhao Feng would definitely not agree. However, Zhao Feng thought about it and gave the child demigod 5 ancient dream realm fruits. The child demigod played a huge role in the fight against the Emperor of Death. His sacred body and heaven-sealing 18 palms could limit the power and intent of the Emperor of Death, which meant that the Emperor of Death they were facing before wasn't even at his full strength. Otherwise Zhao Feng would have been severely injured if not dead. Zhao Feng knew that the child demigod wasn't truly loyal to him. The child demigod's biggest wish was to obtain resources and recover his demigod strength. Little Kuan Yun, if you don't go all out in the coming battle, I will heavily restrict your resources, Zhao Feng added, and the child demigod's heart jumped. Did Zhao Feng notice that he didn't use his full strength before? In reality, after recovering to the Void God realm, the child demigod could use many more techniques. Within the 1,000-yard-wide crater, Zhao Feng and the child demigod were both cultivating. The difference was that Zhao Feng was using the 10,000 divine thoughts technique and split his thoughts into several in order to multitask. At the moment, he could split his thoughts into 1,500 or so, which was on par with Emperor Duanmu. However, if he split his thoughts into 100 or 1,000, they could only do easy tasks such as controlling pets. Only 4 or 5 could actually do the more complicated tasks. For example, comprehending the God Tribulation lightning needed a lot of focus. On this day, Zhao Feng now had 170 wisps of God Tribulation lightning in his purple soul sea. It seemed as if the more he had, the faster the rate of absorption. This wasn't just because of Zhao Feng's Emperor Intent. His soul had been cleansed by the God Tribulation lightning and now had a faint aura of the God Tribulation lightning, meaning that the God Tribulation lightning head didn't repel Zhao Feng's soul as much. Sii. 170 ancient symbols of lightning appeared in his soul sea and gave off an immortal and undying aura. Zhao Feng's soul and intent were getting stronger every day. Even his soul had some characteristics of the God Tribulation lightning. For example, his mental energy attacks now contained the element of the God Tribulation, which countered almost every power under the heavens. The damage it caused was hard to heal. Over the last few days, Zhao Feng also had a breakthrough in his comprehension of the Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning. His true Yuan dimension glittered with a golden color that was much more obvious than before. I've understood about 50% of the Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning, and its power is already comparable to the Wind Lightning Emperor's Golden Destruction Wind Lightning, Zhao Feng murmured. If he added his God Tribulation Lightning intent, the strength of his Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning was comparable to the Dark Gold Destruction Wind Lightning. However, the difference in cultivation between Zhao Feng and the Wind Lightning Emperor was too big, and the same was true for the difference between Zhao Feng and the Emperor of Death. On top of that, the Emperor of Death surpassed the Wind Lightning Emperor in almost every way other than speed. Zhao Feng suddenly realized that a Sovereign Lord expert was within 10 miles of the 1,000-yard-wide crater. The other sovereigns nearby seemed to have created some large arrays that blocked the power of heaven and earth. This group of people glanced at the crater with greed and excitement. Humph! Zhao Feng snickered coldly. How dare they disrupt him cultivating? Boom! Magnificent power formed in the sky and caused the heaven-earth Yuan Qi to roar. A large figure of a male with purple hair surrounded in lightning appeared in the sky. It was as if he was a god of lightning. The outline and appearance of the male was the exact same as Zhao Feng, and it even had part of his strength. Is this a projection formed from utmost power? The legends say that only those at the unfathomable emperor level could have such power. The magnificent male waved his hand and caused space to shake as an unblockable force passed through the physical world. Wah! The inland experts that were trying to approach him all spat out blood and were severely injured. Emperor projection, the child demigod murmured. He didn't expect Zhao Feng's soul intent to become consolidated by the God Tribulation Lightning to the point that he could use this secret technique. Emperor, forgive us. We are dumb and disturbed the Emperor's rest. The nearby experts were all scared, and their faces became pale white. The Emperor projection in the air had only gently raised his hand and immediately injured all of them and made them unable to use their powers. At this moment, these experts acted like ants. This island is similar to the Azure Flower Continent. Zhao Feng murmured and remembered his home country. It had been many years since he left the Azure Flower Continent. As for the Emperor projection, he learned it from Duanmu Qing. As long as he had Emperor intent, he could use it. Fuck off! The Emperor projection in the air raised his hand and all the experts were sent flying. A couple breaths later, all of them were pushed out more than 100 miles, and they were greatly ruffled. They couldn't express their shock. The strength of an emperor is way too terrifying. Everyone let out a breath. Why would a legendary emperor appear here? The strongest here were only sovereign lords, and they were the only ones who had even seen a void god realm. However, there hadn't been a new emperor in this island zone for the past 10,000 years. Even normal 2-star sects and 2.5-star forces most likely didn't have an emperor. Usually, only peak 2-star sects had emperors guarding them. Everyone, leave. These experts quickly retreated. If the emperor changed his mind, he could kill them with just a thought. Within the 1,000-yard crater, Zhao Feng sat back down, and the child demigod's surprise started to fade. Zhao Feng's bloodline, comprehension, and potential are too terrifying, especially after he managed to successfully absorb the God Tribulation Lightning. The child demigod felt a lot of pressure. If this continued, Zhao Feng's future achievements might surpass his own. Of course, that was only if Zhao Feng was able to survive the pursuit of death. Not good. Zhao Feng suddenly sensed something and glanced in a certain direction. The next instant, a dark beam of light passed through the barrier of the bright flower area and caused the skies to darken. It was as if doomsday had appeared and a dark era was about to start. Intent of death. An emperor intent. The experts who just retreated felt as if they had fallen into an abyss and couldn't control their lives. The power of death filled the air and destroyed all signs of life in its path. So fast. Zhao Feng and the child demigod looked at each other and charged toward the Emperor of Death without hesitation. Lightning wings wind flash. A pair of scarlet gold wings covered in wind lightning formed behind Zhao Feng's back and summoned a scarlet gold storm that contained a chaotic aura of destruction. Boom! Zhao Feng flew into the air and clashed heavily against the Emperor of Death. Compared to when he was at the Sky Sacred Qin Palace, Zhao Feng's strength was half a level higher. Death Force Field. The Emperor of Death's expression changed slightly as a black field appeared around him, which reflected damage and devoured life. Boom! 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 These peak experts of the bright flower area below felt as if the heavens were shaking and space itself was shattering. This fight between emperors caused heaven and earth to shatter and form a surge of heaven-earth yuan qi. Just the remains from their battle would create 100-yard-wide craters on the ground. And this was under the fact that Zhao Feng and the Emperor of Death were fighting in the air near the limitless ocean. If this wasn't the case, this battle between emperors would be a disaster for the entire area. I still can't break through the death force field. Zhao Feng's wings fluttered quickly as he exchanged blows with the Emperor of Death with his agility. Now that his attacks contained the fusion of the 3 spatial domains and he had the advantage in speed, he could manage to fight with the Emperor of Death head-on. But the latter's death force field was still too strong. It engulfed any attack under a certain amount of damage and reflected a portion back at Zhao Feng. Because Zhao Feng had merged the God Tribulation Lightning into the Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning, the death force field was only able to absorb 50 to 60% of his attacks at most. But that was still enough to make Zhao Feng helpless. Sacred body dominating strength. The child demigod started to glow with gold as the size of his 4-year-old body became bigger and formed a golden figure in the sky that crushed toward the Emperor of Death. The sacred body dominating strength pressured the Emperor of Death's physical body. And it was extremely profound. The Emperor of Death's immortal death body wasn't a body-strengthening technique. Heaven sealing 18 palms. The child demigod sent out mystic golden palms one after another, and they seemed to twist the skies as they restrained the Emperor of Death. Restricting Yuan palm. A weird whirlpool started to form in the child demigod's palm, and beams of gray golden light covered the Emperor of Death. The Emperor of Death's face became grim. The power of death and all sorts of yuan qi around him stopped flowing as smoothly. He was a peak emperor whose power of death was outstanding. If it were a normal king in his place, the majority of their strength would be frozen. Restricting yuan palm. Even though it's incomplete, you actually know this lost forbidden technique. The Emperor of Death's expression started to change as he stared at the child demigod. Although the child demigod wasn't acting as the main offensive force, his support made the Emperor of Death unable to use his full power. If not for that, Zhao Feng or any other Emperor-level figure would have been captured or killed long ago. Scythe of Death. The Emperor of Death started to condense a black scythe in his hand that was surrounded by the power of death. Whoosh! Whoosh! Shoo! The giant scythe slashed through the air and complemented the death force field, forcing Zhao Feng and the child demigod back. Wah! The child demigod's secret technique was forcefully destroyed, causing him to instantly spit out a mouthful of blood. Shwa! A bloody gash was left behind on Zhao Feng's delicate scales, but it quickly started to heal. The entire area was covered by the Scythe of Death. Normal kings would have died several times over already. Zhao Feng's and the child demigod's attacks would be absorbed by the death force field and used to strengthen the Scythe of Death. He's too strong. The child demigod was stunned, facing the frenzied Emperor of Death. One had to know that when Zhao Feng and the child demigod teamed up, their battle power was, at least in the short term, almost comparable to Duan Muqing's. Lightning wings spatial flash. The scarlet gold wings behind Zhao Feng's back radiated a bright light as he merged into the air. Whoosh! One could only see a thin arc of lightning speed into the space outside. This time, when Zhao Feng used the lightning wing spatial flash, he was much more familiar with it compared to before, and his scarlet gold wind lightning was even stronger than the wind lightning emperor's golden wind lightning. Zhao Feng could move at least 1,000 miles inland and dozens of thousands of miles outside. Master, you're even faster now. You're getting close to the wind lightning emperor's peak speed. The child demigod's voice sounded from within the ring. Lightning wings spatial flash. Zhao Feng moved once again over the limitless ocean and increased the distance between him and the Emperor of Death. Our combined battle power is almost at the peak Emperor level, but we still can't break through his death force field or his immortal death body. The Emperor of Death also has the Eye of Death, but he hasn't used any forbidden techniques yet, Zhao Feng murmured. After fighting him twice, Zhao Feng was well aware that the Emperor of Death was extremely strong. However, he didn't realize that the Emperor of Death didn't want to use his Eye of Death much because he was wary of the ninth god's eye. Firstly, The Emperor of Death knew that Zhao Feng's god spiritual eye was extremely resilient against soul attacks, which is what his Eye of Death specialized in. Secondly, the Emperor of Death was worried that any attacks from the Eye of Death would ignite the ninth god's eye's potential. The more awakened the ninth god's eye became, the lower his chances of stealing it. Due to all these reasons, the Emperor of Death couldn't unleash his full power. If it were any other peak-tier king or emperor in Zhao Feng's place, they would have been killed many times over already. Even some of the top emperors might be defeated. Over the next couple days, Zhao Feng managed to escape from the Emperor of Death once more. A month later, Zhao Feng passed by several island zones and entered a Void Ocean Spiritual Palace. The Void Ocean Spiritual Palace is neutral, and they have the sacred lands behind their backs, Zhao Feng thought. His aim here was to rest and replenish some resources, including recovery spiritual pills. Normal places didn't have any spiritual pills that could replenish the energy of a king. Only Void Ocean Spiritual Palaces had what Zhao Feng and the child demigod wanted. His other aim was to cultivate here by relying on the status of the Void Ocean Spiritual Palace to protect him. However, within 10 days of their arrival, the Emperor of Death arrived and immediately attacked. One could imagine what kind of disaster a clash between two emperors would bring to the Void Ocean Spiritual Palace. A fight between emperors. It's the legendary Emperor of Death. Chaos broke out within the Void Ocean Spiritual Palace. The palace lord was extremely angry, but he couldn't do anything to stop them. Normal palace lords were usually half-step kings or kings. It was rare for them to be emperors. Emperor of Death, how dare you attack a Void Ocean Spiritual Palace? Are you not scared that the floating dream sacred land will chase after you? Zhao Feng laughed loudly and used the lightning wings spatial flash to disappear from the Void Ocean Spiritual Palace. The Emperor of Death remained expressionless and simply used the Death Instant Shadow to follow. To obtain the ninth god's eye, he would do anything, even if it meant offending all the forces of the sacred lands. Besides, it wasn't as if all the sacred lands cooperated with each other. While Mystic Light Realm sacred lords spent most of their time in seclusion trying to become a god, and the Emperor of Death wasn't scared of other emperors. In the blink of an eye, 2 months passed by. On this day, Zhao Feng entered a familiar island zone, the 10,000 Abyssal Island Zone. The 18 Corners Pirate Sacred Land was the most famous place within the 10,000 Abyssal Sacred Land. I'll be able to reach the 18 Corners Pirate Sacred Land soon, and the Cold Moon Emperor owes me a favor. Zhao Feng's eyes twinkled, and he realized that the next destination might be a turning point. Zhao Feng arrived at the 18 Corners Pirate Sacred Land several hours later. He didn't conceal his king aura, and his wings created a windstorm as he flew. All the elites in the 18 Corners Pirate Sacred Land were stunned by Zhao Feng's aura, and some of them recognized him. Whoosh! Zhao Feng's wings fluttered as he landed on a pirate king's ship. Zhao Feng, it's you! The pirate king was a recent addition who had a bald head. Zhao Feng didn't know him, but the bald king recognized Zhao Feng. He had personally witnessed Zhao Feng's strength in the Pirate Emperor's Inheritance Sacred Land and how he single-handedly decided who got to be the emperor. Where is the Cold Moon Emperor? Although Zhao Feng didn't know him, that didn't stop him from asking about the Cold Moon Emperor's location. The bald king felt the aura radiating from Zhao Feng and replied respectfully. Under the guidance of the bald king, Zhao Feng flew in a certain direction. An hour later, Zhao Feng closed in on a large castle formed of several ships. It was like a small island, and various trees, buildings, and bridges could be seen on it. After the new pirate emperor was crowned, the pirates forged this castle, which was named the Pirate Emperor Imperial Court. The ruler of the Pirate Emperor Imperial Court was obviously the Pirate Emperor, the Cold Moon Emperor. Zhao Feng's arrival made the Pirate Emperor Imperial Court break out into discussion. Not only did Zhao Feng's aura surpass most kings, most of the upper echelon pirates knew him. Zhao Feng was soon greeted by several pirate kings, including the male with golden hair and the one with a long beard. Zhao Feng, you actually have time to come to the Pirate Emperor Imperial Court? A bright voice sounded as a flawless silver-clad female appeared, and she was covered in imperial power as she appeared in front of Zhao Feng. She had a perfect body and a crown on her head. On her back was a sword and blade. The Cold Moon Emperor was surrounded by moonlight as she smiled at Zhao Feng. After a few words of greeting, Zhao Feng suggested that they talk privately, and this action caused many pirates to be envious as the Cold Moon Emperor agreed without hesitation. Furthermore, the serious and stoic Cold Moon Emperor started to smile when she saw Zhao Feng. Whoosh! Zhao Feng turned into a streak of lightning and flew through the air under a surge of Emperor intent. Emperor intent! The upper echelon pirates in the Pirate Emperor Imperial Court exclaimed. They were dumbfounded. Surprise and admiration appeared in the Cold Moon Emperor's eyes. She had to admit that Zhao Feng's growth was faster than expected. No wonder he wasn't interested in the Pirate Emperor's throne. A while later, Zhao Feng and the Cold Moon Emperor were floating in a spot over the limitless ocean that was within direct view of the sunlight, and this place could even destroy the souls and bodies of normal kings. Zhao Feng, you didn't come here just to visit, right? The Cold Moon Emperor asked. In her mind, Zhao Feng was a cultivation maniac and wasn't interested in status. Without any hesitation, Zhao Feng told her why he came. During this process, shock appeared on the Cold Moon Emperor's face, and her expression changed dramatically. It wasn't just because of the Emperor of Death's fame, it was also because Zhao Feng could clash with the Emperor of Death head-on and still survive for so long. If it wasn't for the fact that I was a fast runner, I would be dead already. But now that we've become stronger, it's not impossible for us to defeat the Emperor of Death. Flames of battle intent appeared in Zhao Feng's eyes. This battle intent also contained his fury. Zhao Feng had never been so humiliated ever since he started cultivating. Zhao Feng, I owe you a favor and will give it my all. I can't be sure that we'll win, but I believe that we can at least hold our ground, the Cold Moon Emperor said decisively. If it weren't for Zhao Feng's help, she never would have been able to obtain the throne of the Pirate Emperor and became a Void God Realm Emperor. The Cold Moon Emperor's voice contained a surge of confidence. Zhao Feng knew that the Cold Moon Emperor was the new Pirate Emperor, meaning she would be protected by the Pirate Sacred Land. The crown on her head allowed her to not fear any emperor for the next decade, but she also couldn't leave the Pirate Sacred Land for 10 years. This protection was only limited to the Pirate Sacred Land. This was all planned out by the first Pirate Emperor in the Heaven's Legacy Secret Realm. It was because of this that the throne could be passed down for so long. Later that day, Zhao Feng entered an enormous desolate canyon similar to the 8 Desolate Mountain. The environment here was bad, and the entire place was covered by a storm. Some other canyons had various mortals and descendants of some pirates, but almost no one lived in this canyon. The reason he chose this place was to make sure no innocents would be harmed in the coming fight. Zhao Feng, rest here for now. If you need anything, just tell me. The Cold Moon Emperor left behind a communication token in the shape of a half-moon. Zhao Feng nodded his head and entered seclusion with the child demigod. After fighting multiple times, both their cultivations had increased, and they had replenished their resources at the Void Ocean Spiritual Palace earlier. I've absorbed more than 200 wisps of God Tribulation lightning now. More than 200 symbols of lightning could be seen in his purple soul sea, and they all radiated an immortal and undying aura. There wasn't just an increase in quantity, these symbols were more condensed than before as well. Zhao Feng's comprehension of the Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning had reached 50 to 60%, and he had now merged in more than twice as much God Tribulation intent into it. Wang. A layer of delicate scales appeared around Zhao Feng's body, and the aura of the 10,000 ancient races bloodline became stronger. The increase in cultivation and body strength could also make one's bloodline stronger and increase its potential. Normal bloodlines would reach their limit at the Sovereign Lord rank or the King rank, but for a 10,000 ancient races bloodline, the Origin Core realm was just a start. Even the King level was only considered to be a childhood stage. Over the past couple days, the Mystic Ice-Scaled Race bloodline and the God Spiritual Eye bloodline were growing stronger and awakening even more. Zhao Feng realized that this wasn't just because of his cultivation. The fruit from the ancient dream realm also played a part. One could see how effective these fruits were by looking at how the child demigod wanted them so badly. Thinking up to here, Zhao Feng ate another fruit. There's only 15 left. There were fewer and fewer fruits on the tree, and 5 of them only just formed and wouldn't ripen until several years later. In the blink of an eye, the majority of a month passed by, and Zhao Feng and the child demigod used all their time on cultivating. After eating 3 fruits and utilizing a group of treasures, Zhao Feng's cultivation finally broke through. Middle stages of the Void God realm. Zhao Feng's true Yuan dimension glittered with scarlet and gold. The size of it had doubled in comparison to the early stages of the Void God realm. This meant that Zhao Feng's foundation and base were much stronger, allowing him to fight long battles with emperors with the assistance of his emperor intent and 10,000 ancient races bloodline that gave him a fast recovery speed. The child demigod ate a total of 5 fruits, and his strength recovered quickly. His golden Kuan sacred body had reached the early stages of the 5th level, and he could almost challenge emperors with his physical body alone. In terms of cultivation, he was also close to the middle stages of the Void God realm. The two had become a lot stronger. One day, the Cold Moon Emperor led 2 peak-tier kings to this desolate place. Ever since the Pirate Emperor inheritance, the strength of the older pirate kings had increased dramatically. The 2 peak-tier kings were the Giant Shark King and the Ghost-Scaled King. As one of the 3 major figurehead pirates in the past, the Giant Shark King's shark bloodline and physical body were extremely strong, and he had played a big role in fighting Emperor Mu Yun. After the Pirate Emperor inheritance, he had become stronger. The Ghost-Scaled King was a domain-level king that survived the battle with Emperor Mu Yun. He not only had a high-class fish bloodline, he also had a ghost spiritual body. Zhao Feng, the Giant Shark King and the Ghost-Scaled King are both willing to help you face the Emperor of Death. The Cold Moon Emperor smiled and said. Zhao Feng could see that these 2 peak-tier kings were confident in themselves. Their strength was greater than others of the same cultivation, and when they teamed up, they could fight against normal emperors, especially since their bloodlines were unique. Zhao Feng, I didn't think that we'd be working together one day. The Giant Shark King laughed. Both of the peak-tier kings knew about the terrifying potential and growth of Zhao Feng's mystic ice-scaled race bloodline. Furthermore, Zhao Feng even fought the Emperor of Death before and still managed to escape. They believed that they would be able to block the Emperor of Death here with their combined strength. In addition, the pirate sacred land was their territory. Even if they couldn't defeat the Emperor of Death, they would receive Zhao Feng's friendship and gratitude. From this day onward, the Cold Moon Emperor and the 2 peak-tier kings started to live here as well. Zhao Feng and the child demigod still quietly cultivated, and their auras made the 2 kings click their tongues. 3 days later, with the help of a continuous stream of resources, the child demigod had recovered to the middle stages of the Void God realm, and his sacred body now exerted a crushing pressure. The Cold Moon Emperor, Zhao Feng, the child demigod, and 2 peak-tier kings, a total of 5 experts gathered together, and Zhao Feng felt that the Emperor of Death would arrive soon. At the same moment, a stealthy middle-aged male wearing a crown appeared around the edge of the 18 Corners pirate sacred land. Shua! A lotus appeared in the Emperor of Death's hand and quickly expanded. On the lotus was a white-eyed little girl. Zhao Feng's at the pirate sacred land. This battle will be the turning point of destiny. The white-eyed little girl slowly raised her hand. A picture appeared in the air and depicted a fight. The person in the very middle was the Emperor of Death, who was being attacked by several people on all sides. Incredibly, these images kept on changing. It was obvious that the little girl's eye of destiny had been awakened further over the last couple years. The last picture at the end was the Emperor of Death and Zhao Feng facing one another, and each of them had a blurry but terrifying image behind their backs. How is this possible? These people forced me to use the shadow of the Death God? The Emperor of Death couldn't help but exclaim, Master, the upcoming battle will affect destiny. No matter who wins or loses, I won't be able to help you anymore. The white-eyed little girl bit her lips. She had reached her limit in helping the Emperor of Death. After saying that, she bowed to the Emperor of Death and asked to leave. I'll only drag Master down if I stay. My destiny isn't in the Tsang Ocean, it's in the continent zone, the white-eyed girl said, and a weird light glittered in her eyes as she looked in the direction of the continent zone. Okay, I won't force you. The Emperor of Death gave her a deep glance. Without her help, he never would have been able to find Zhao Feng in the Tsang Ocean. Furthermore, she tried to divine what would happen with all her powers. To a certain degree, the Emperor of Death had the initiative. "Before I leave, I would like to tell Master something," Bai Lin suddenly said. "Go ahead," the Emperor of Death replied. "The owners of the God Eyes are destined by heaven. They are hard to replace, and the ninth God's Eye seems to be even more unique. I hope that Master won't be too bent on it," Bai Lin said after some deep thought. Both Bai Lin and the Emperor of Death were descendants of God Eye holders. Although the difference between the God Eye of Destiny and the Eye of Destiny was only one world, the former was the ancestor and the latter was just the descendant. The Eye of Death was the same. To become the owner of the God Eye of Death, the Emperor of Death would need to kill the God of Death and use his Eye of Death to become the next God Eye owner. This was because God Eyes were unique. Only one of each could exist in the universe. However, even in theory, the difficulty of doing so was almost completely impossible. Therefore, Bai Lin was telling her master that some things couldn't be forced. "I know what you mean." The Emperor of Death paused for a moment before speaking with excitement. "However, the ninth God's Eye hasn't truly awakened yet, nor has its owner matured. This is the easiest chance to obtain a God's Eye. If I pass up this chance, I will regret it for life." In comparison to replacing an original God's Eye owner, this chance could be said to be 1 in a trillion. Although the difficulty of killing Zhao Feng was increasing more and more, there was still hope, and as long as there was hope, the Emperor of Death wouldn't give up. Furthermore, at the moment, he had the absolute advantage in strength. Within the 18 Corners pirate sacred land, a dark light passed through the limitless ocean, and the coldness radiating from it caused the beasts nearby to go silent and tremble out of fear. "It's the Emperor of Death." The hearts of the pirates he passed started to twitch. The Cold Moon Emperor Zhao Feng and company in the desolate canyon received news of his approach as well. In order to deal with the Emperor of Death, the Cold Moon Emperor had ordered all the upper echelons of the pirate sacred land to prepare. "He's almost here." Zhao Feng turned into a streak of lightning and flew into the limitless ocean area. The Cold Moon Emperor, the Child Demigod, the Giant Shark King, and the Ghost-Scaled King followed suit. A while later, the sky became dark as an old majestic figure came into view. "Emperor of Death." The hearts of the Cold Moon Emperor and company shook as they became on guard. This person was one of the oldest emperors in the Tsang Ocean, and he was often called a nightmare. A new emperor and 2 peak-tier kings. "Zhao Feng, you really think just these people will be able to kill me?" The Emperor of Death's voice was filled with coldness and mockery. The situation in front of him was what Bai Lin had drawn with the Eye of Destiny. So he was ready for this. Zhao Feng and company looked at each other. The Emperor of Death didn't seem to be surprised by the current scene. On the contrary, it was as if he was expecting it. "Emperor of Death," Zhao Feng laughed. "Almost all your subordinates have been killed by me, and your disciple Wenlong blew himself up in front of you. Is that where your confidence comes from?" Hearing that, the Emperor of Death's face became ugly. The pressure he had tried to exert was instantly shattered. "I will take revenge for them by killing you. Then I'll go find the Eye of Samsara and repay them, whereas you will die and suffer in pain for eternity." The smile on the Emperor of Death's face became cold and deadly. The Cold Moon Emperor and company couldn't help but hiccup. The Emperor of Death was quite cruel. He didn't want to just end Zhao Feng's current life. He was going to make Zhao Feng wish for death in his next lives as well. The atmosphere tensed up. The Emperor of Death suddenly spread his arms, and a sticky black spatial dimension of death appeared in the air. Little world. The Cold Moon Emperor and company felt the unrivaled power of a little world. The little world of death devoured the heaven-earth Yuan-Chi nearby and pulled everything, especially souls, toward it. The hearts of the Child Demigod and the 2 peak-tier kings became heavy as they felt a massive pressure on them. The power of death continuously expanded, as if it wanted to finish them all off at once. The little world became more and more corporeal, and it was like a black abyss. Once they were sucked into it, the result would be unimaginable. "I'll just break your little world." The Cold Moon Emperor gripped her sword and blade and sent cold flashes of moonlight through the air. The sword and blade created large chasms in the darkness, so deep that the bottoms couldn't be seen. The interaction of the sword and blade seemed to twist space itself, and the little world of death showed signs of becoming unstable. The Emperor of Death's expression changed. He didn't expect that this woman was an emperor that specialized in offense. The Cold Moon Emperor had unparalleled attacks even when she was a king, and she was amongst the best in terms of offense in the pirate sacred land. Although she still hadn't formed her own little world, her spatial domain was close to materializing, and each of her attacks contained the power to split heaven and earth. In terms of offense, the Cold Moon Emperor was much stronger than normal emperors. Attack together! The Giant Shark King and the Ghost-Scaled King circulated their bloodline power and used their peak-tier king strength to bombard the little world. Sacred body dominating strength. The child demigod's body became bigger, and it was covered in gold. A golden image appeared behind him and exerted pressure toward the Emperor of Death and his little world. Boom! Boom! At this moment in time, the Emperor of Death's little world started to tremble, and many cracks appeared on it. His own body became heavy as the sacred body dominating strength pressured toward him. The Emperor of Death had underestimated the Cold Moon Emperor and the two peak-tier kings, and he also underestimated the child demigod's growth. After reaching the middle stages of the Void God realm, the child demigod's golden Kuan sacred body had reached the early stages of the 5th level, so he was able to block even emperors for a period of time without trouble due to his overwhelming intent. I didn't expect a demigod to become that brat's servant. The Emperor of Death glanced at the child demigod. The child demigod's actions stiffened, but he kept on attacking the little world of death. At this moment, Zhao Feng hadn't even entered the fight yet, and the Emperor of Death's little world was already shaking slightly. However, the little world was extremely unique. It devoured the heaven-earth Yuan-Chi nearby, and it could turn nearby beings into a pile of white bones. A portion of any attacks from the outside world would be engulfed by the little world and transformed into its own power or reflected at the attacker. It was the same as the death force field. Even several emperors wouldn't be able to shatter the little world within a short amount of time. The Emperor of Death isn't attacking immediately like before. He's using his little world instead. He's planning something. Zhao Feng didn't participate in the attack. He was waiting for the Emperor of Death's next move. The little world of death specialized in defense and support. Its offense was average. Death spirits of hatred. The Emperor of Death's Eye of Death created a pitch-black whirlpool, and several terrifying auras radiated from within the whirlpool. Several bone-chilling screams sounded from the little world. Shwa! 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 3 spirits of hatred, each several hundred yards tall, appeared from the Eye of Death. The very middle one even radiated an aura comparable to an emperor. An emperor's spirit of hatred. Zhao Feng's god's spiritual eye inspected these spirits. The emperor's spirit of hatred looked like Emperor Mu Yun, but it wasn't completely him. There seemed to be other soul auras from emperors merged into it as well. The auras from the other 2 spirits were comparable to peak-tier kings. Amidst howls and screams, the 3 spirits of hatred charged toward the Cold Moon Emperor, the Giant Shark King, and the Ghost-Scaled King. Their hearts tingled, and their souls became uneasy. Each of the spirits were formed by at least 3 partial souls of emperors or kings. The Cold Moon Emperor, the Giant Shark King, and the Ghost-Scaled King were forced to retreat. These 3 spirits of hatred weren't just normal spirits of hatred. They had powerful offensive soul capabilities, as well as the ability to reduce the damage of physical attacks. The Cold Moon Emperor had no advantage at all in terms of the soul and was suppressed by the Emperor-level spirit. The Giant Shark King and the Ghost-Scaled King were forced to retreat by a king-level spirit respectively. Humph, measly spirits. Let me kill the 2 king-level spirits first. Zhao Feng snickered coldly. Mental energy spike. Zhao Feng's left eye released a giant purple-colored mental energy spike that was surrounded by a wisp of mysterious lightning. Boom! One of the king-level spirits was instantly killed by the mental energy spike. One had to know that Zhao Feng's mental energy spike contained the faint power of God Tribulation Lightning, which dealt critical damage to souls. Everyone was stunned by Zhao Feng's ability to destroy a peak-tier king spirit instantly. Just as Zhao Feng was feeling slightly smug, his expression changed dramatically as he sensed something. "Master, save me!" the child demigod yelled. "Gaze of death!" The Emperor of Death's dark eyes of death landed on the child demigod from with the little world. The child demigod struggled in pain as a faint golden yuan soul was about to leave his body. When Zhao Feng used the mental energy spike, the Emperor of Death used the gaze of death. His target is the child demigod. Zhao Feng's heart dropped, and he realized that he had been tricked by the Emperor of Death. The spirits of hatred were only summoned to distract him. Although the child demigod's intent was strong, his soul was still only at the king level. On top of that, his forte was body strengthening, and even in his previous life, his soul was his weakness. "Master, save me!" The child demigod struggled as his faint golden yuan soul was about to leave his body. If it wasn't for the fact that his demigod intent was so strong, even a late-stage void god realm king would have had their soul taken away by the Emperor of Death already. As long as I finish off the revived demigod Kuan Yun, Zhao Feng and the others are nothing to worry about. The Emperor of Death hid in his little world and fully circulated his eye of death to the maximum. At the same time, the dark golden crown on his head released a large amount of soul undulations, which increased the power of his soul Dao technique. "I've been tricked." Zhao Feng's face became solemn. The demigod Kuan Yun played a large role in the fight against the Emperor of Death. His sacred body and various secret techniques could suppress the Emperor of Death's intent and limit his strength. If they lost the child demigod, Zhao Feng and company would face the Emperor of Death at his peak, and the gaze of death was about to succeed and fully drag the child demigod's soul out of his body. The Emperor of Death had prepared for this. He used the little world as protection while the Emperor-level spirit of hatred was used to stall the Cold Moon Emperor. If we want to stop the Emperor of Death, we need to enter his little world. Zhao Feng started to think. This plan wouldn't work though. Within one breath, the child demigod's soul would be sucked away by the gaze of death. If that's the case, Zhao Feng took a deep breath as a large source of purple-colored eye intent formed a whirlpool in his left eye. What? The Emperor of Death first paused before yelling out loud. "How is this possible?" Shua! The faint golden yuan soul that had been partially pulled out was suddenly being pulled by another force. The gaze of death started to reverse. Gaze of the god eye. A purple whirlpool formed in Zhao Feng's left eye and connected to a purple world of illusions. A suction force came from Zhao Feng's god's spiritual eye. Great! The child demigod was overjoyed as he felt a technique similar to the gaze of death pull him back in the direction of his body. Gaze of the god eye? You stole my secret technique! The Emperor of Death's smile froze, and his expression became ugly. At this moment, his breathing rate quickened and his face became green. The gaze of death was one of his most famous techniques, and now it had been stolen by a brat. All one needs is a certain amount of understanding of the Tao of the soul. It's not very hard to learn. The main issue is that one needs an eye bloodline in order to properly utilize its force. Zhao Feng's purple hair blew in the wind as his left eye locked on to the child demigod. Gaze of death versus gaze of the god eye. These two skills were technically the same, and both of their eye bloodlines were biased toward the soul. Zhao Feng had faced the gaze of death twice before. The first time was when he was in the Purple Saint Ruins, and the second was when he was at the border of the Pirate Sacred Land. Adding on the fact that Zhao Feng had studied the Dark Eye Secret Manual before, he understood a lot of the theory behind the technique, so it wasn't too hard for him to inspect it and create his own gaze of the god eye. In the air, the faint golden yuan soul of the child demigod was slowly returning to his body. Having demigod intent, the power of his struggle against the gaze of death was almost the same as an emperor's struggle. This meant that the Emperor of Death needed to face the combined power of Zhao Feng and the child demigod when trying to steal the yuan soul. Emperor of Death, your techniques shall become even more famous through me. Zhao Feng laughed. The Emperor of Death was already enraged, and he almost spat out blood when he heard that. The child demigod's faint golden yuan soul returned to his body and was guarded with the help of Zhao Feng. In order to prevent the Emperor of Death from doing this again, Zhao Feng used his eye bloodline power to set up a layer of protection made from God Tribulation, lightning around the child demigod's Yuan soul. This meant that, if the Emperor of Death wanted to try again, he would have to face the power of the God Tribulation lightning, meaning that it won't go as smoothly. Master, thank the heavens you made it in time. The child demigod let out a long breath. On the other side, the Cold Moon Emperor, the Giant Shark King, and the Ghost-Scaled King were gaining the upper hand against the Spirits of Hatred. The main offensive techniques of the Spirits of Hatred were soul-based, and their physical attacks weren't very strong. The Cold Moon Emperor and company were able to deal with them after learning their pattern. The Giant Shark King and the Ghost-Scaled King made one of the spirits scream continuously. The Ghost-Scaled King had a ghost spiritual body, so his attacks were more effective against the spirits while he took less damage from them. Zhao Feng and the child demigod started to attack the little world without hesitation. Scarlet Golden Exploding Fist. Zhao Feng circulated his scarlet gold destruction wind lightning and punched out, creating a storm of scarlet and gold that covered the sky. The entire dark dimension was covered by a scarlet golden light that seemed to shake space itself. This punch contained Zhao Feng's 3 spatial domains as it clashed with the little world. Crack. Cracks started to appear on the little world, and one was even several miles long. The scarlet golden exploding fist focused on the word, exploding, and it had the power of the God Tribulation lightning contained within it. Not good! The expression of the Emperor of Death changed dramatically as his little world was bombarded and filled with holes. Now that Zhao Feng's soul had absorbed more than 200 wisps of God Tribulation lightning in total, its aura was more condensed than ever before, and the damage it caused was hard to repair. The Emperor of Death's little world was based on his true Yuan dimension, so he could fix the damage to his little world with his own power. However, the destruction caused by the God Tribulation lightning was too strong. It harmed the structure and origin of the little world itself, meaning that it would be almost impossible to repair. Emperor of Death, I'll first destroy your little world, Zhao Feng roared, and he unleashed his attacks as a pair of wings formed behind his back. The wings of wind and lightning increased his destructive power, and his advantage in speed allowed him to move as he pleased. Restricting Yuan Palm. Heaven sealing 18 palms. The child demigod used his supreme intent and limited the Emperor of Death's strength. The flow of the Yuan Qi within the little world started to become rougher as its power was diminished. Ridiculous. The Emperor of Death was enraged as he watched his own little world become so damaged. Compared to a couple months ago, Zhao Feng and the child demigod were much stronger. They were growing at incredible rates. Zhao Feng cultivated the scarlet gold destruction wind lightning, which had never appeared before, and he had even absorbed a couple hundred wisps of God Tribulation lightning. Zhao Feng focused on destroying the foundation of the little world, and his God spiritual eye could easily see the flaws of the Emperor of Death's little world. Death Force Field. The Emperor of Death's little world quickly faded away and was replaced by a force field that devoured all life and power nearby. The radius of the Death Force Field was smaller, but it could absorb and reflect damage better. However, Zhao Feng's Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning was different from before because it now had the power of God Tribulation Lightning merged into it. Boom! 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 The Death Force Field started to shake, and it could barely reflect less than 30% of Zhao Feng's attacks. The God Tribulation Lightning countered almost everything in the world, including the power of death, so how could all of it be absorbed and reflected? The Death Force Field would tremble every time the two powers clashed, and it used up a lot of energy. Restricting Yuan Palm. The child demigod's attacks also changed. Restricting Yuan Palm restricted every type of Yuan Qi. When it was mastered to a certain level, it could even seal off all the Yuan Qi within a certain area. At that point in time, only physical body strength wouldn't be affected. This secret technique and body-strengthening techniques were an unparalleled combination. The Death Force Field was also a type of Yuan Qi power, so it started to weaken due to the restricting Yuan Palm. Scythe of Death. The Emperor of Death counterattacked as a black scythe started to form in his hand. Whoosh! 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 The scythe flashed through the air as it sliced toward Zhao Feng and the child demigod. But with the help of the restricting Yuan palm, the flow of Yuan Qi from the Emperor of Death's attacks and defenses weren't as smooth as before. Ding! 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 Sparks flew everywhere from Zhao Feng and the child demigod's bodies. Their physical defense had reached a monstrous level. Zhao Feng had the mystic ice-scaled race bloodline, and all physical attacks would start to freeze when they came near him. The scales on his skin were also extremely strong. The child demigod's golden Kuan sacred body had reached the early stages of the 5th level. Peak-tier kings would find it hard to even break his defense. All he needed to do was stay with Zhao Feng and take care of the Emperor of Death's counterattacks. Watch how I destroy your death force field. Zhao Feng moved quickly through the air with the child demigod and started to condense a 100-yard-long scarlet golden spear out of lightning. Scarlet gold destruction wind lightning appeared in the form of a spear. Whoosh! The scarlet golden spear had a destructive aura as well as the god tribulation lightning, and it pierced straight through the death force field. As the death force field started to crack and become unstable, ding! Dang! Dang! The Emperor of Death waved his scythe of death and clashed with Zhao Feng's scarlet gold spear of lightning, creating a wave of forbidden power. Retreat! The expressions of the giant shark king and the ghost-scaled king changed dramatically as they retreated. What terrifying power! The Cold Moon Emperor felt the clash between Zhao Feng and the Emperor of Death, and even she had to move back a bit. The remaining king-level spirit of hatred was already full of injuries. It was instantly killed in the shockwave. The Emperor of Death, Zhao Feng, and the child demigod were fighting, and they had no time to worry about the spirits of hatred. The longer the Emperor of Death fought, the more shocked he was. Zhao Feng's strength had grown at an alarming rate. The scarlet gold destruction wind lightning had already exceeded the wind lightning inheritance, and his battle power was even stronger than the wind lightning emperor at his peak. The wind lightning emperor didn't have god tribulation lightning merged into his attacks. Zhao Feng already has the battle power of a peak emperor. The Cold Moon Emperor and the 2 peak-tier kings were stunned. Zhao Feng's overall battle power was indeed not weaker than top emperors. After the god tribulation lightning merged into the scarlet gold destruction wind lightning, it exceeded the original limits of the wind lightning inheritance and gave his wings unparalleled speed. The mystic ice-scaled race was one of top 110,000 ancient races. It had extremely powerful defense, and it came along with a spatial domain. The potential of the god spiritual I made the Emperor of Death wary. The only thing Zhao Feng lacked was cultivation. After all, the Emperor of Death had lived for a very long time while Zhao Feng was only in his 20s. In the air above the limitless ocean, the Emperor of Death and Zhao Feng entered a fiery hot battle. Of course, the child demigod played a huge role in this fight. Because of his existence, the Emperor of Death was unable to use many techniques or unleash his full power. The Emperor of Death was enraged. His Eye of Death, which he relied on the most, was countered by the 9th god's eye to a certain degree. In the clash between the gaze of death and the gaze of the god eye previously, his eye bloodline trembled with uneasiness, and he didn't dare to use his Eye of Death in case it awakened the 9th god's eye. Boom! The sound of an explosion sounded in the soul dimension not far away. The remaining Emperor-level spirit of hatred was killed by the Cold Moon Emperor and company. Attack together! The Cold Moon Emperor, the Giant Shark King, and the Ghost-Scaled King, the 3 strongest pirates, charged over. None of them were simple. The Giant Shark King and the Ghost-Scaled King had unusual bloodlines, and their battle powers were very close to an emperor's. The 2 also specialized in defense and survival. At this moment in time, just as the white-eyed girl predicted, the Emperor of Death was being attacked by the group. Why? The Emperor of Death felt an unstoppable destiny. He tried to counter destiny, but nothing changed. With the addition of the Cold Moon Emperor and company, the Emperor of Death was at a disadvantage for the first time. Unrivaled sword and blade. The Cold Moon Emperor's sword and blade intertwined, creating a storm of moonlight. Wang Shu! The storm spun quickly, and a sharp light filled the air. Everything it moved over was cut into atoms. The Emperor of Death's death force field cracked even more as the unrivaled sword and blade clashed with it. The Cold Moon Emperor was courageous, and she charged toward the death force field. Everyone was stunned, and mockery appeared on the Emperor of Death's face. Getting close to the death force field was courting death. The death force field had a strong engulfing power, and it could reflect attacks. However, what happened next surprised everyone. A mystic power surged from the crown on the Cold Moon Emperor's head as it connected to the entire 18 Corners pirate sacred land in a mysterious way. The Cold Moon Emperor was instantly covered in an eye-catching light. This power of protection increased her defense by more than 10 times. Boom! The Cold Moon Emperor made the storm of swords and blades charge straight into the death force field. No matter who won or lost this exchange, the Cold Moon Emperor wouldn't be defeated. The protection of the pirate sacred land. Only now did the Emperor of Death remember that the Cold Moon Emperor was the new pirate emperor and was protected by the pirate sacred land. One had to know that the Cold Moon Emperor specialized in offense, and with this protection she was basically undefeatable, meaning that she was extremely troublesome. Crack! Boom! With the combined attack of the 5 from both inside and outside, the death force field finally shattered. Bam! The instant the death force field broke apart, the Emperor of Death was pushed back several miles, and he was slightly injured even though he had an immortal death body. Before he could stabilize himself, wind lightning wings slash. A large pair of scarlet golden wings moved as fast as light and appeared right next to the Emperor of Death, slicing him with a scorching edge. Schwa, the scarlet golden wings radiated a destructive aura as they exploded onto the Emperor of Death. A bone-deep gash was instantly left behind on the Emperor of Death's body. If it weren't for the fact that he had an immortal death body, he would have been maimed or killed already. The Emperor of Death groaned from his injury. Terrifyingly, the damage caused by the power of the god Tribulation lightning in combination with the aura of destruction was almost eternal and unable to be recovered from. Restricting Yuan Palm. Rainbow of swords and blades. The child demigod and the Cold Moon Emperor charged in from the other direction. The Emperor of Death had to summon his little world in order to block their attacks, but all this could do was stall them. The little world wouldn't be able to last very long against these 5 experts. In just a couple breaths, many holes and gaps started to appear in the little world, some from earlier and some from now. Don't let him run. Zhao Feng and the Cold Moon Emperor looked at each other as they charged into the depths of the little world. Under normal situations, entering the opponent's little world wasn't a good idea, but the little world of death was extremely damaged at the moment, so they weren't scared. The Cold Moon Emperor had the protection of the pirate sacred land and couldn't be defeated, so she obviously didn't need to worry at all. Ice Imperial Spear. An ice-blue liquid flowed through Zhao Feng's bloodline and formed a layer of armor of ice over his body, sealing heaven and earth in ice. Zhao Feng roared as he unleashed the power of his 10,000 ancient races bloodline, and a powerful chill froze space. Ice instantly started to appear in the little world, and its power was weakened further. Unrivaled sword and blade. The Cold Moon Emperor slashed her sword and blade around, creating a storm of moonlight that filled the air. The world started to shatter wherever they went. Boom! 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 The little world started to shake and was close to breaking apart altogether. Zhao Feng and the Cold Moon Emperor soon arrived in front of the Emperor of Death. In this dimension, the Emperor of Death was protected by the little world, but unfortunately the world was close to breaking apart, and it could no longer strengthen him. You've actually forced me to this step. As expected of the owner of the 9th God's Eye, the Emperor of Death sighed as his pitch-black eyes started to spin, and a strong force of death radiated from them. I couldn't do it alone. Zhao Feng didn't get cocky. Although the Emperor of Death was at a big disadvantage and was injured, he still had at least 95% of his full battle power remaining. Crack! Crack! The little world started to crumble into pieces from to the internal and external attacks and was about to explode. But the 3 inside remained unharmed as their defense had all reached an incredulous level. Although the Cold Moon Emperor's fundamental defense was weaker, she had the protection of the pirate sacred land. Shadow of the Death God. The Emperor of Death's eye bloodline power started to burn as it created cold flames. Burning his eye power? Zhao Feng was stunned as the Emperor of Death became covered in dark flames. Whoosh! Whoosh! The flames that covered the Emperor of Death started to expand and turn into a figure of death. That's... Zhao Feng and the Cold Moon Emperor both felt their souls go cold as they felt a forbidden aura of death. The skies turned dark. Wu, the figure of death, held a scythe in one hand and seemed to be the essence of darkness. In this moment, the souls of everyone present started to shake. It was as if the shadow of the death god itself had covered them. Suddenly, the eyes of the figure of death slowly started to open, and it shot out two beams of death as it looked down coldly. Shadow of the death god? Could it be the power of the legendary god Eye of Death, the supreme ruler of death? The souls of Zhao Feng and company went cold and felt as if all their powers were restricted. The shadow of the death god started to condense, and it released a forbidden aura that turned everything within 10,000 miles into darkness. All beings in this instant were controlled by the god of death. The shadow of the death god uses the bloodline of the Eye of Death to summon a tiny bit of power from the ancestral god Eye of Death. Zhao Feng, I really didn't think you would be able to force me to use this. The Emperor of Death revealed a pained expression as he was below the shadow of the death god. Every moment the shadow of the death god was up, his bloodline and soul power would be burned. However, victory now belonged to him. God Eye of Death. This is just a tiny bit of power from it? The Cold Moon Emperor, the child demigod, and company were completely shocked. They were unable to control their souls. Just a single gaze from the shadow of the death god controlled their lives. The only one able to struggle was Zhao Feng, but his mystic ice-scaled race bloodline trembled uneasily. After all, this was a bit of power from the god Eye of Death itself. Wang, Zhao Feng circulated his mystic ice-scaled race bloodline to the maximum, and it even started to burn, covering him in a layer of ice-blue dragon scales. In the next instant, the roar of a dragon sounded, and the image of a mystic ice dragon surfaced behind Zhao Feng's back. The power of a supreme ancient dragon clashed against the world of darkness. This is the power of a 10,000 ancient race's bloodline retracing back to its ancestor. Zhao Feng was secretly shocked. He knew about this move from the information contained within his bloodline, but he didn't think he would be able to use it in this situation. However, facing the image of the mystic ice dragon, the shadow of the death god remained unmoving, and the group's fear and despair of having their lives controlled was still there. The scythe in the hand of the shadow of the death god slowly lowered downwards, and half of the Cold Moon Emperor's soul was pulled out. The souls of the child demigod and the two peak-tier kings were about to leave their bodies even though they weren't even in range of the attack. Only Zhao Feng could fight back. His god's spiritual eye was extremely resilient against attacks in the soul dimension. Pong! 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 Zhao Feng's left eye started to beat quickly. The ancient is broken, and the ancient god slain will turn into 1 trillion particles of dust. A sigh seemed to resound throughout space and time. Boom! The entire dimension of his left eye shook, and Zhao Feng's eye bloodline started to burn. A faint purple flame enveloped Zhao Feng's body. Wang, the figure of an ancient god-demon, started to form amidst the faint purple flames, and an ancient, magnificent aura appeared, causing the actions of the shadow of the death god to stiffen slightly. The figure of the ancient god-demon covered the sky, and its purple flaming figure radiated an ancient and majestic aura. Zhao Feng felt his eye bloodline power burning, and there was a searing pain. He finally understood why the Emperor of Death only used the shadow of the death god now. Shua! The Cold Moon Emperor's soul returned to her body, and cold sweat covered her body. Even though she had the protection of the pirate sacred land, that didn't mean she was truly undefeatable. When the Emperor of Death used the shadow of the death god without regard for the price, even those at the mystic light realm would need to be wary. Wu, the outline of the god-demon figure became blurry, and one could tell it was the phantom of an ancient god-demon from its aura. At this moment in time, the mystic ice dragon figure that came from Zhao Feng's mystic ice-scaled race bloodline trembled and started to move around the figure of the god-demon. In the air, the power of the shadow of death and the ancient god-demon clashed, creating an invisible shockwave that sent the Cold Moon Emperor flying. Bam! The Cold Moon Emperor used this power to retreat more than 100 miles away, and her face went white. If she didn't have the protection of the pirate sacred land, she would have lost a layer of skin at the very least, even if she was a peak emperor. The child demigod and the two peak-tier kings were sent flying away as well, even though they were farther away. Boom! Two enormous figures left their owners' bodies and smashed together in the air above the limitless ocean. A loud explosion sounded as a wave of flames surged throughout the soul dimension. Everyone felt as if space itself was shaking. Both bloodline powers are retracing back to their ancestors. The child demigod was stunned. The shadow of the death god was used by the Emperor of Death through his eye bloodline, and it summoned a tiny bit of power from the god Eye of Death. The god demon behind Zhao Feng's back was the origin power from his god's spiritual eye that hadn't awoken yet. From a certain degree, it could be said that they were igniting the very source of their eye bloodlines. The difference was that Zhao Feng's was the first ancestor himself. Boom! 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 The two figures clashed in the sky and would dim a bit every time. At the same time, the expressions of Zhao Feng and the Emperor of Death became weaker and weaker. Crack! The mystic ice dragon surrounding the ancient god demon finally managed to shatter the shadow of the death god. And the ancient god demon, even though it was on the verge of disappearing, managed to hit the Emperor of Death. Not good. The Emperor of Death was sent flying, but the crown on his head and the immortal death body blocked most of the damage. Crack! The ancient god demon and the mystic ice dragon images both faded away at the same time. Zhao Feng's expression was extremely weak. Igniting his bloodlines burned his life force and soul. He could already feel his eye bloodline power weakening. Death instant shadow! The Emperor of Death turned into a dark streak of light and disappeared. In terms of speed, the Death instant shadow wasn't as fast as the lightning wing spatial flash, but it was more profound. So fast! The Cold Moon Emperor and company all sucked in a cold breath. It was difficult to force the Emperor of Death to this degree. Skylocking bow! A cold glint flashed across Zhao Feng's eyes as he held the dark silver bow, and mysterious markings started appearing on it. Wang, an eye-catching scarlet golden arrow started to condense, and it radiated a sharpness that seemed able to pierce space. The very next instant, the Emperor of Death, who had already run out several thousand miles, felt his body go cold as the sharpness locked on to him. He even felt that space itself was being locked onto, which even restricted his death instant shadow. As the name suggested, the sky-locking bow could lock the sky itself. Now that Zhao Feng's intent had become stronger, he started to unlock its true potential. Shoo! A scarlet golden arrow seemed to appear out of a portal as it shot into the Emperor of Death's heart. Sky! Locking! Bow! The Emperor of Death's body froze as the scarlet golden arrow shot straight through his heart. If it was just a regular arrow, he wouldn't have been scared since he had the immortal death body. However, the scarlet golden arrow contained the power of the scarlet gold destruction wind lightning, which included the intent from the god tribulation lightning. The destruction caused by this could counter even his immortal death body. Death instant shadow! The Emperor of Death was almost burning his true yuan as he tried to escape. If he stayed in the pirate sacred land any longer, he would be unable to escape. After all, there was still the Cold Moon Emperor and countless pirate kings. After I escape, I'll return in the future and refine all my enemies into spirits of hatred. The Emperor of Death was filled with anger and humiliation that he had never felt before. Being one of the oldest emperors in the Tsang Ocean and someone who had reincarnated twice, he was unparalleled below the mystic light realm, and he could even face many sacred lords on equal footing. When had he ever faced such humiliation and defeat? Right at this moment, shoo! A second scarlet golden arrow flashed through the air and shot into his head. The Emperor of Death groaned as his body shook, but this time he was prepared. A tattoo of death appeared around his body, which increased the defense of his immortal death body. Zhao Feng shot out 3 arrows until the Emperor of Death finally escaped his range. Cold Moon Emperor, Giant Shark King, Ghost-Scaled King, thank you for all your help. I will repay you all in the future. Zhao Feng said solemnly and took a deep breath to circulate his blood and recover his true yuan. The child demigod stood next to him and looked in the direction where the Emperor of Death had escaped. Zhao Feng, you want to chase after the Emperor of Death? The Cold Moon Emperor asked in surprise. All of them combined their strength to finally defeat the Emperor of Death. But if Zhao Feng chased after the Emperor of Death alone, it would be risky. I can't give the Emperor of Death time to recover. I will repay the humiliation I've suffered because of him several times over, Zhao Feng said decisively. Whoosh! A pair of scarlet golden wings formed behind Zhao Feng's back as he put the child demigod into the ancient metal ring. Lightning wings spatial flash. A long arc of lightning flashed over the limitless ocean. The speed that Zhao Feng displayed was much faster than the Emperor of Death. With Zhao Feng's strength and speed, as long as he doesn't underestimate the Emperor of Death, he shouldn't be at a disadvantage. The Cold Moon Emperor let out a breath. Zhao Feng had the battle power of a peak emperor, and his speed was extremely fast. The most important point was that he wasn't scared of the Eye of Death, which was something no other emperor could claim. Furthermore, Zhao Feng also had the sky-locking bow, a weapon great for chasing after people. Over the limitless ocean, a dark beam of light and an arc of lightning flashed one after the other. Zhao Feng's lightning wing spatial flash had the advantage in terms of speed, and every time he was in range, Zhao Feng would unleash an arrow. Bam! The Emperor of Death groaned. The only thing he could do was strengthen his defense in order to reduce the damage from the sky-locking bow. This was because the sky-locking bow's attacks couldn't be evaded unless the difference in cultivation was simply massive. When Zhao Feng's sky-locking bow and God's spiritual eye worked together, the opponent wouldn't be able to dodge at all as long as they were locked onto, but shooting the arrow meant that he would pause for a moment and slow down. The Emperor of Death would use that chance to further the distance between them after taking a hit head-on. Immortal Death Body. I still can't find its counter. Zhao Feng's eyebrows locked together. The Emperor of Death had the Immortal Death Body, and he was basically undying. Its defense was extremely strong, and its recovery speed was monstrous. If it weren't for the fact that Zhao Feng had merged the God Tribulation Lightning into his attacks, there was no chance of him killing the Emperor of Death at all. However, Zhao Feng's God Tribulation Lightning was limited and couldn't be used forever. The Immortal Death Body had no vital points, and the Emperor of Death was essentially a living corpse. The Emperor of Death also had the power of death, meaning that in such a living dead state, his Yuan Qi recovery rate was much faster than other emperors. Several days later, Zhao Feng had chased the Emperor of Death to another island zone. His breathing rate was quick and extremely weak. The Emperor of Death in front was severely injured. Whoosh! Zhao Feng turned into a streak of scarlet golden lightning, landed on an island filled with Yuan Qi, and started to rest. The Emperor of Death is more injured than me, but his cultivation and amount of true yuan are far above mine. Zhao Feng's eyes twinkled. He then ate an ancient dream realm fruit and several spiritual pills to increase his recovery speed. Master, you can try another method and try to attack the Emperor of Death with soul-based attacks, the child demigod warned. The soul? Zhao Feng started to think. His God spiritual eye was indeed soul-based, but so was the Emperor of Death's. The soul is the source of all life. Even if you somehow managed to defeat his immortal death body, you wouldn't be able to stop the Emperor of Death reviving or stealing another body, the child demigod explained. That's right. Zhao Feng nodded his head. He had thought about attacking through the soul before, but the Emperor of Death and his Eye of Death excelled in the soul. Furthermore, the crown he wore was a soul Dao treasure that could increase the strength of his soul Dao techniques, as well as increase the recovery speed of his soul power. Although it will be slightly difficult, that's also the best way, Zhao Feng decided. His eye bloodline was a god eye, and he had fused with the power of God Tribulation Lightning, which was something that the Emperor of Death didn't have. Lightning wings spatial flash. After resting for half a day, Zhao Feng then entered the limitless ocean once more and continued the chase. Although his cultivation was nowhere close to the Emperor of Death's, he had Emperor intent and a 10,000 ancient races bloodline. In terms of recovery speed, he was even better than the Emperor of Death. Half a day is enough for the Emperor of Death to have run a bit, Zhao Feng's eyes twinkled. But he was somehow confident. He opened his god's spiritual eye to find the traces of aura left behind by the Emperor of Death and follow him. The god's spiritual eye could see the source of everything, which is why he was also able to copy techniques and other things. In terms of tracking, he was definitely amongst the best. On top of that, he had the little thieving cat, as well as that last bit of death intent left behind in his soul sea by the Emperor of Death. Zhao Feng soon confirmed a direction and used the lightning wing's spatial flash. He was sure that the injured and weak Emperor of Death would need more time than him to recover. In the air above the limitless ocean, a dark figure entered an island where the yuan qi was much thicker than the azure flower continent. An hour later, within a 1.5-star clan on the island. Arg! Screams sounded from everywhere, and the Emperor of Death stood in the air as his tattered little world of death enveloped the clan. Emperor, why are you slaughtering my clan? A sovereign kneeled on the ground and asked in a trembling voice. His eyes were red. The Luo Lin clan has no enmities with the Emperor. Please spare us? Another sovereign begged. Even though it was just a broken little world, it wasn't something a 1.5-star clan could fight against. Forces that hadn't reached 2 stars were less than ants in the eyes of the Emperor of Death. Tentacles of Death. Black tentacles started to shoot out from the Emperor of Death's body and wrap around the cultivators at the True Spirit Realm and Origin Core Realm. The life force and essence of these cultivators started to flow away, and color started to appear in the Emperor of Death's pale face as his yuan qi was replenished. Tentacles of Death was a healing technique that devoured the life force of others in order to heal himself and recover his yuan qi. The greatest advantage of this technique was that it was fast, but the weakness was that the replenished yuan qi was impure and needed time to refine. If he overused it, it would change the origin of his true yuan and wouldn't completely heal him, especially if he was already severely injured. Furthermore, relying on it too much could leave hidden injuries behind. However, even though it had these weaknesses, Tentacles of Death was still a heaven-defying method. Within an hour's time, the entire Luo Lin clan was destroyed by the Emperor of Death. I've recovered 40 to 50% of my yuan qi, but my injuries haven't healed as well as I thought. The Emperor of Death murmured. The Luo Lin clan had turned into a mountain of white bones, but only those at the Origin Core Realm or higher would be effective on him if he used Tentacles of Death. Several hours later, the Emperor of Death destroyed another 1-star clan and recovered 60 to 70% of his true yuan. The recovery of my injuries is quite slow. The Emperor of Death's eyebrows locked together. Damage that could injure an emperor wouldn't be easily healed. Furthermore, Zhao Feng's Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning contained the power of God Tribulation Lightning. I need to find some kings in order to recover faster. Thinking up to there, the Emperor of Death left this island and found that there was a 2-star sect nearby after soul-searching a sovereign lord. Normal 2-star sects were obviously nothing in the eyes of the Emperor of Death. Half a day later, at a 2-star sect named the Scorching Sky Sect, Emperor of Death, why are you attacking my sect? A bulky male surrounded in blue flames roared. Cries sounded from all over the Scorching Sky Sect as the Emperor of Death used his little world of death to cover any experts at the Great Origin Core Realm or higher. Tentacles of Death. The Emperor of Death's black eyes landed on the bulky male in blue flames, and the latter's soul seemed to freeze. He was unable to fight back, and the Tentacles of Death soon wrapped themselves around the male in blue flames and started to absorb his life force and essence. Emperor of Death, stop! The sound of flying appeared, and 3 Void God Realm Kings arrived. One of them was a good-looking female wearing a dress. She was a peak-tier king. The Emperor of Death was slightly surprised. He didn't expect reinforcements to arrive so quickly. The traces of him killing 2 whole 1-star clans had been found, and these 2-star sects had the ability to send long-distance messages to one another. Ha ha ha. For Void God Realm Kings, including a peak-tier king, will be enough for me to recover some injuries. The Emperor of Death laughed and started to circulate the power of his little world of death toward the kings. The bulky male in blue flames started to become skinnier as his life force and true yuan were sucked away. The expressions of the 3 kings that just arrived changed dramatically, and they charged at the Emperor of Death without hesitation. They only had the courage to fight the Emperor of Death because he was injured and his little world was broken. Emperor of Death, you shouldn't kill so many people and create so many enemies. My older brother is Emperor Yu. I believe you've heard of him. The female in the dress was extremely charming. However, the Emperor of Death snickered coldly. Fake righteousness. If you were in the same situation as me, you cultivators of the righteous path would be even more savage than me. The Emperor of Death wasn't dumb. He didn't go around killing everyone he saw in his spare time. On the contrary, he knew the aforementioned principle very well. The first time he was killed was because he had made enemies out of too many emperors, and several peak emperors teamed up to defeat him. However, desperate times called for desperate measures, and the Emperor of Death needed to use the fastest method to recover. Only with such a method would he have any hope of turning the tide and obtaining victory. Boom! Boom! Bam! The three kings clashed against the Emperor of Death. The Emperor of Death remained nonchalant. He was easily suppressing the three even while using the tentacles of death to absorb the life force and essence of the origin core realms and the other king. The Emperor of Death didn't use all his strength because he didn't want to accidentally kill these kings. The Emperor of Death is severely injured and can still suppress us so easily? The expressions of the three were solemn, and they were stunned. What kind of battle had the Emperor of Death been through for him to resort to this method to recover his strength? Right at this moment, the male in blue flames finally turned into a pile of white bones from the tentacles of death. It's your turn. The Emperor of Death licked his lips. Using the tentacles of death on Void God Realm Kings was much more effective. The hearts of the three kings went cold, and they had thoughts of retreating. Endless death. The Emperor of Death laughed gruesomely as an abyss appeared in his eyes of death and covered the three kings. Arg! The three kings screamed as they entered an ocean of death. We've fallen into the illusion of the Eye of Death, the female exclaimed. But no matter how they struggled, they were unable to escape the erosion of the power of death. Tentacles of death. The Emperor of Death's figure appeared above the three and wrapped them in tentacles. At the same time, the three kings started to struggle in the physical dimension. The female was barely able to awaken, but the Emperor of Death put his hand down on her shoulder and froze her thoughts. So this is the strength of a peak emperor? The face of the female was pale white and filled with bitterness. Even though the Emperor of Death was injured and his little world was broken, he wasn't someone that they were able to handle. Right as the three kings were about to be slain, whoosh, an arc of lightning flew in from the limitless ocean and closed in on this direction. A maelstrom of flames and lightning started to emerge into heaven and earth. So fast! The Emperor of Death exclaimed as his hand on the female stiffened, and shock appeared on the female's face as she saw signs of hope. It seemed that the Emperor of Death was being chased by someone even more terrifying, which was why he was running around and slaughtering others to regain his strength. Shoo! A piercing sound resounded through the air, and the face of the female went white. Her soul shook, and the space nearby seemed to be restricted by a certain power. It was as if she couldn't dodge no matter what she did. Shwa! The female felt blood splatter everywhere as a scarlet golden arrow pierced into the Emperor of Death's body. A dark, mysterious carving glowed on the surface of the arrow and radiated an undying and immortal aura. See! The Emperor of Death groaned as pain surged in his soul. Wang! The golden crown on his head released a brilliant golden light alongside a soul undulation. That arrow contained a soul attack. The female felt her soul go cold, and she felt as if 10,000 crackles of lightning had sounded. Under that attack, the Emperor of Death was slightly injured as he faced the burning sensation of the scarlet gold destruction wind lightning as well as the god tribulation lightning. The female used this chance to escape the Emperor of Death's grasp. The other two kings weren't as strong as the female, so they were still held down by the tentacles of death. Senior, save us! The female flew toward the magnificent aura closing in. A male with scarlet golden wings and purple hair holding a bow appeared. His left eye was purple and seemed to flash with lightning, and it was full of cold killing intent. It was him that forced the Emperor of Death to this situation? The female was in disbelief. The aura of life from this newcomer was extremely young, but the power radiating from it wasn't weaker than the Emperor of Death. There was a powerful confidence to it, and even more importantly, he was unharmed, which made it clear that he was the pursuer. Emperor of Death, you're actually using such methods to recover your injuries? No matter what you do, you won't be able to heal from damage caused by God Tribulation lightning, even if you die. Zhao Feng was shocked, and his expression went cold as he inspected with his god's spiritual eye. If it were damage caused by a normal emperor, the Emperor of Death might be able to recover from most of it, but the power of God Tribulation lightning couldn't be healed so easily. Ha ha ha. Zhao Feng, although I haven't fully recovered from my injuries yet, my energy has. Just the two of you alone aren't my match. The Emperor of Death laughed out loud. He realized that Zhao Feng's Yuan Qi hadn't fully recovered yet. In order to chase the Emperor of Death and not give him any time to rest, Zhao Feng's Yuan Qi would be slightly depleted. Zhao Feng's Yuan Qi was indeed slightly depleted and not at its peak, but that was on purpose. He wanted to follow the Emperor of Death closely and not give the latter any time to recover. Seeing that the tentacles of death were still wrapped around the other two kings, Zhao Feng said no more and immediately started attacking. Gaze of the God Eye. A surge of purple-colored eye bloodline power appeared from Zhao Feng's left eye and formed a world of purple that pulled in the souls of others. You actually... The expression of the Emperor of Death changed dramatically as the crown on his head released a profound undulation. The Void God Realm Kings in front of the Emperor of Death, as well as the other experts of the two-star sect, felt their souls go cold, and they were unable to breathe. It was as if their souls were being pulled away, and the closer they were to the Emperor of Death, the more obvious this effect was. He's merged the Tao of illusions into the foundation of the gaze of death. The Emperor of Death's heart shook. The gaze of death sucked one's soul away with overwhelming strength. Under normal situations, pure soul strength determined the victor, but there could be other factors such as intent, mastery, various tricks, and whatnot. Zhao Feng used the Tao of illusions. He specialized in the Tao of illusions. The first Tao he ever learned was the Tao of illusions, which came from the illusion fish picture in the Broken Moon clan. After the Fan Luan Ancient Sound Palace, Zhao Feng's understanding of the Tao of illusions had entered an entirely new level. According to what Lu Qinxin in the wall said, the highest level of illusion was reality. At this moment in time, Zhao Feng's gaze of the God Eye wasn't just a simple soul-sucking force anymore. He fused in the Tao of illusions and made it stronger. I was the one that created this technique, and you're using it against me? The Emperor of Death was enraged, but he still needed to gather his intent and use a Soul Tao technique in order to block the gaze of the God Eye. Zhao Feng's gaze of the God Eye had a momentum of surpassing the original technique. This was because Zhao Feng used the technique through the ninth God's Eye, which was much stronger than the Eye of Death. The only thing he lacked was cultivation. Run! The other two Void God Realm Kings used this chance to escape the tentacles of death. Hee. Zhao Feng then stopped the gaze of the God Eye. His true aim was just to stop the Emperor of Death from using the tentacles of death to recover his injuries. Heaven sealing 18 palms. The child demigod glowed with a golden radiance as his sacred body crushed through the air. He also sent mystic golden palms through heaven and earth that limited the Emperor of Death. Scarlet golden eye flame. The instant the Emperor of Death was restricted, Zhao Feng's left eye started to burn with a scarlet golden color. Whoosh! A half-transparent scarlet golden flame landed on the Emperor of Death and burned throughout both the physical and mental energy dimensions. This scarlet gold wind lightning eye flame contained the power of God Tribulation lightning, and all 300 wisps of God Tribulation lightning in his purple soul sea glowed. Arg! The Emperor of Death howled as the fire started to burn across his body and soul. The scarlet golden eye flame contained the power of destruction as well as God Tribulation lightning, both of which countered his immortal death body. His soul was the part that was most affected. Zhao Feng's skylocking bow attacks and the scarlet golden eye flame were both soul-based. The scarlet gold destruction wind lightning is technically the highest level of the wind lightning inheritance, Zhao Feng murmured. He had now mastered over 60% of the scarlet gold destruction wind lightning. When the power of God Tribulation lightning was merged into it as well, the scarlet golden wind lightning was enough to severely injure most emperors. Mental energy spike. While the Emperor of Death revealed a flaw, a transparent purple crystalline mental energy spike pierced into his soul. Wang, the crown on the Emperor of Death's head bloomed open like a lotus, but it couldn't really fight back against the power of God Tribulation lightning, especially when it was combined with the intent of destruction. The crown was even damaged, and the Emperor of Death's soul was slightly injured, adding to his injuries from before. Damage to the soul is even harder to recover from. Zhao Feng's smile was poisonous. Although his Yuan Qi was slightly depleted, his main focus was Soul Dao attacks, and the recovery speed of a 10,000 ancient races bloodline made Zhao Feng unafraid of long battles. Dark Eye Death Flames. The eyes of the Emperor of Death formed a forbidden black light that twisted the air and thundered toward Zhao Feng. Zhao Feng's heart went cold as he felt the danger of death. The Emperor of Death rarely used direct soul attacks against Zhao Feng, but now he did. Wang. A layer of delicate ice blue scales condensed around Zhao Feng's body as a suit of ice armor appeared as well, covering everything within 100 miles in his mystic ice domain. Boom! Smoke appeared from Zhao Feng's body as the dark eye death flames landed on him. At the same time, black flames burned in Zhao Feng's purple soul sea. Boom! Zhao Feng's left eye shook as the 300 wisps of God Tribulation lightning radiated a power that could threaten gods and demons alike. Boo waves started to appear in the lake in the very center of his soul sea as lightning and wind interacted in the sky. Emperor of Death. It's no use. The difference in our soul strength isn't very big. A faint smile appeared on Zhao Feng's face. His God spiritual eye was extremely resilient against soul attacks, including those from the Eye of Death. However, this had one prerequisite. The difference in soul strength between Zhao Feng and the Emperor of Death couldn't be too big. Zhao Feng had an Emperor-level soul, which had also been cleansed by the God Tribulation lightning and the God's spiritual eye. Although there was a difference in cultivation between the two, the difference in soul strength wasn't big. As I thought, the Emperor of Death wasn't hopeful in the first place, but his expression became grim. He had to admit that he finally met someone who countered him perfectly. He relied on the Eye of Death the most, but it was suppressed by the ninth God's Eye, and his immortal death body was countered by the God Tribulation lightning. Scarlet Golden Eye Flame. Mental Energy Spike. Zhao Feng attacked from afar. The child demigod was between Zhao Feng and the Emperor of Death, and he used his heaven-sealing 18 palms to restrict the Emperor of Death. Boom! Boom! Under the frenzied attacks from Zhao Feng's God's spiritual eye, the Emperor of Death's face became white once more. In terms of understanding and mastery of the soul, the Emperor of Death had the advantage, but Zhao Feng's God's spiritual eye was a true God eye, and its potential only got stronger as the battle continued. More importantly, Zhao Feng's God's spiritual eye was extremely resilient against soul attacks. In addition, Zhao Feng had a bloodline of the 10,000 ancient races and the Ice Imperial Spear, so he was about on par with the Emperor of Death in terms of physical defense, but his recovery speed was faster. The Emperor of Death's expression started to change as he finally understood why Zhao Feng dared to chase after him without fully recovering his Yuan Qi. Zhao Feng's actual strength is about the same as mine. The only difference between us is cultivation. The Emperor of Death took a deep breath and had to acknowledge reality. Under the pursuit of death, Zhao Feng had grown stronger extremely quickly. Scythe of Death. A black scythe started to form in the Emperor of Death's hand. Death Force Field. A thick black layer of darkness appeared around him as he charged toward Zhao Feng and the child demigod with his scythe. The expressions of the child demigod and Zhao Feng changed dramatically. The combination of the Scythe of Death and the Death Force Field was extremely strong and could be considered perfect. Any attack against the Emperor of Death would be absorbed by the Death Force Field and then added to the Scythe of Death. Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning. A 100-yard-long scarlet golden spear started to condense in Zhao Feng's hand, and it radiated a terrifying aura of destruction and God Tribulation lightning. Ding! Ding! Bam! The scarlet golden spear and the Scythe of Death clashed in the air. Zhao Feng and the child demigod were forced back, restricting Yuan Palm. The child demigod used another technique and sent gray-golden beams of light toward the Emperor of Death, limiting the flow of yuan qi. Boom! 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 The battle caused the nearby mountains around the two-star sect to shatter, and the shockwave from their fight made the expressions of the three kings change dramatically. Who is that purple-haired man? He's chasing the Emperor of Death. The female in the dress and the other two kings pulled away from the fight. The Emperor of Death and the purple-colored hair male both used shocking eye bloodlines and soul techniques. Even in a physical fight, they were elites amongst emperors. Death instant shadow. The Emperor of Death suddenly turned into a dark beam of light and sped away from the island. So fast! The three kings exclaimed. Lightning wings spatial flash. The wings behind Zhao Feng's back released a brilliant glow of light as he turned into an arc of lightning and followed behind. It was obvious that his speed was faster than the Emperor of Death. The three kings were like wooden chickens. When they finally reacted, they all let out a long breath. I think that purple-haired youth is called Zhao Feng. Only a handful of experts are able to chase after the Emperor of Death. Looks like another expert has appeared in the Tsang Ocean. One had to know that the strength of these three kings were all at least comparable to the Saint Moon Ant Goddess of the Tianlu Islands. Scarlet Golden Eye Flame. Sky-locking bow. Zhao Feng kept on attacking as he chased from behind. Over the limitless ocean, this pursuit of death spanned over several island zones and caused heaven and earth to shake wherever they fought. It was a disaster. At the beginning, the Emperor of Death still had the ability to fight back, but after several months, he could only focus on defense. Slowly but steadily, news of this pursuit started to spread, and the legend of the left-eyed heavenly emperor was known across the Tsang Ocean. Half a year later, in a void ocean spiritual palace. Whoosh! A dark beam of light entered, and a male with a missing right arm and scorch marks appeared on the street. The male wore a golden crown that was full of cracks, but the aura of death emitting from him made those nearby uneasy. It was hard to imagine that this male was one of the oldest emperors of the Tsang Ocean. Emperor Zimu! The Emperor of Death murmured in a tone that no one else could hear. A few breaths later, Wang, the imperial power of an emperor, appeared from one of the corners of the void ocean spiritual palace. Emperor of Death? A surprised voice sounded as a middle-aged male in purple robes appeared. He was covered in a purple glow and gave off a weird smell. Emperor Zimu! Exclamations of nearby experts sounded as respect and admiration appeared in their eyes. It was extremely rare to see emperors outside the sacred lands. However, this spiritual palace was in a rather large island zone that contained 8 or so two-star sects, so this spiritual palace had an emperor in charge. Emperor of Death! How did you become like this? Emperor Zimu was shocked. He had been in seclusion for the past year or two and didn't know much about the outside world. Emperor Zimu, you owe me a favor from several thousand years ago, and now I need your help. The Emperor of Death said in a deep tone and summarized what had happened. But he didn't mention that Zhao Feng had the 9th God's Eye. The pursuer cultivates the Tao of lightning, and since you're an emperor that cultivates the Tao of wood, you counter him. The Emperor of Death said in a solemn tone. There were natural counters to all skills. For example, the Emperor of Death was countered by Zhao Feng, but likewise Zhao Feng's Scarlet Gold Destruction Wind Lightning could also be countered. Those that cultivated the Tao of wood could counter those that cultivated the Tao of lightning. Who could chase you into such a state? Could it be a sacred lord? Emperor Zimu was in disbelief. Don't worry. It's not a sacred lord. He's just a middle-stage void god realm king, but his technique and bloodline are unique. The Emperor of Death summarized Zhao Feng's situation. Right as the two were communicating, whoosh! An arc of lightning with a destructive aura of flames and lightning charged into the void ocean spiritual palace. The newcomer was a purple-haired male with scarlet golden wings. Such speed! Emperor Zimu was surprised even though he already knew that Zhao Feng had the Wind Lightning Emperor's inheritance. Emperor of Death, do you think that I'd be scared to attack you if you're hiding in a void ocean spiritual palace? Zhao Feng's wings fluttered as he looked down from above. In the past half a year, he had given the Emperor of Death a good beating. The Emperor of Death's immortal death body and soul had both been injured by the god Tribulation Lightning, and he had lost 30 to 40% of his battle strength. The future generation is to be feared. Emperor Zimu inspected Zhao Feng, and the latter's scarlet golden wind lightning made him uneasy. Zhao Feng obviously saw Emperor Zimu as well. Emperor Zimu was like Duanmuqing emperors that cultivated the Tao of wood, but Emperor Zimu's strength wasn't at the peak level of the Void God realm yet. Emperor Zimu, if you help me today, I will repay you 10 times as much in the future. The Emperor of Death's voice contained begging. There were still 2 peak-tier kings and 4 domain-level kings in this Void Ocean spiritual palace apart from Emperor Zimu. As long Emperor Zimu helped, the Emperor of Death still had a good chance. Left-eyed Heavenly Emperor. That purple-haired youth. A Void God Realm King and several Origin Core realms within the Void Ocean spiritual palace recognized Zhao Feng's identity. As the pursuit of death had passed through many island zones, Zhao Feng's fame started to spread, and some experts knew of him. Left-eyed Heavenly Emperor? Emperor Zimu's eyes started to twinkle as he started to struggle. At this moment, a king within the spiritual palace was telling him what had happened between Zhao Feng and the Emperor of Death. Emperor of Death, I'm very sorry. I can't help you. Apparently, since you attacked a Void Ocean spiritual palace before, you are now wanted by the floating dream sacred land. Emperor Zimu took a deep breath before finally speaking. What? The Emperor of Death's body swayed. Due to our relationship in the past, I won't attack you, but the Void Ocean spiritual palace can't shelter you either. Emperor Zimu's expression was strict, and a purple-green little world appeared and slowly pressured toward the Emperor of Death. You! The Emperor of Death's expression was extremely ugly. Emperor Zimu's little world was purposely crushing toward him and not attacking Zhao Feng. Zhao Feng floated in the air and looked at all this coldly. It seemed as if the Emperor of Death didn't want to leave the Void Ocean spiritual palace. Instead, he wanted to drag Emperor Zumi and the experts here down along with him. Emperor of Death, you won't be able to escape today. A scarlet golden flame appeared in Zhao Feng's left eye. Boom! An aura started to brew in the sky that made Emperor Zimu and the kings unable to breathe. No! The Emperor of Death felt a critical sense of danger as nearly 800 wisps of God Tribulation lightning symbols radiated an undying aura. Whoosh! A half-transparent scarlet golden flame landed on the Emperor of Death, as if it was a god's punishment. Arg! The Emperor of Death howled as the flames started to spread across the immortal death body and burn into his soul. Fear filled his face as he looked at this nightmare with uneasiness. In just a breath or two, the Emperor of Death's limbs were burnt to a degree where one couldn't even tell that he was human anymore, and his other arm fell off. See, Emperor Zimu couldn't help but take in a deep breath. The purple-haired male in the sky had his hands behind his back and still seemed rather nonchalant. Within the Void Ocean spiritual palace, the other kings and Origin Core realms felt their bones go cold, and they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. He's too strong. So this is the left-eyed Heavenly Emperor. The Emperor of Death didn't even have a chance to fight back at all. The Void God Realm Kings were stunned. Emperor of Death, now that I've merged the power of God Tribulation lightning into my techniques, my strength is enough to threaten even sacred lords. Peak emperors won't be able to last more than 10 breaths against me, Zhao Feng said in an orderly-mannered fashion. Even though Zhao Feng had chased the Emperor of Death for half a year, he hadn't stopped fusing with the power of the God Tribulation lightning, and he now had 800 wisps of God Tribulation lightning, more than 100 times the amount he first had at the Pirate Sacred Land. On top of that, he had unparalleled speed. He was an unrivaled Void God realm. In the history of the Tao of Lightning, one prodigy had used the power of God Tribulation lightning and slowly reached the peak of the world. This legend came from a prodigy on the continent zone, and they eventually became a god. This miracle seemed like it was going to replicated by Zhao Feng. God Tribulation lightning. The heart of Emperor Zimu shook. He chose not to help the Emperor of Death after thinking it through thoroughly. Firstly, the Emperor of Death was wanted by the Sacred Land anyway, and secondly, how strong would the person chasing after the Emperor of Death be? Such a person wasn't something a normal emperor could offend, especially after knowing that the person was a rising prodigy. The second reason was the most important. Therefore, Emperor Zimu didn't want to help the Emperor of Death, and it seemed like this was a wise decision. Although Zhao Feng never greeted Emperor Zimu after entering the Void Ocean Spiritual Palace or even looked at him directly, which made him slightly unhappy, when Zhao Feng revealed his strength, Emperor Zimu's scalp tingled and he started to sweat. Zhao Feng had basically ignored Emperor Zimu's existence, but he had the capability to do so. He or any other peak emperor wouldn't be able to do anything. So close. Emperor Zimu didn't think that his Wood Dao techniques would be able to stop God Tribulation Lightning, and Emperor Zimu didn't have the Emperor of Death's defenses. Zhao Feng. I've lost. The Emperor of Death lay on the ground and spoke in the bitter tone. I'll do as you please. Do as you please. How much humiliation was contained in these 4 words. The hearts of Emperor Zimu and company shook. Do as I please? What if I want your life? You won't fight back. Zhao Feng's gaze seemed to contain the ability to see through one's heart. He could tell that the Emperor of Death was filled with hatred and humiliation. If he let the Emperor of Death live, he definitely wouldn't just leave peacefully. Furthermore, the Emperor of Death's home was in the 10,000 Woods Sacred Land. Who knew whether he would go home and contact some emperors or mystic light realm sacred lords to deal with Zhao Feng? Zhao Feng, treat others kindly? Deadliness appeared on the Emperor of Death's face, which contained signs of a threat. Zhao Feng's eyes remained cold and calm. His thoughts of killing the Emperor of Death had never wavered, but he needed to deal with the final counterattack before the Emperor of Death's death. After all, he was an ancient emperor and he had the Eye of Death. Then, let's die together. The Emperor of Death's face twisted as his power of death condensed and exploded. Not good. Watch out. Emperor Zimu exclaimed and opened his little world in order to block this explosion that could destroy the entire Void Ocean Spiritual Palace. The self-destruction of an emperor was devastating. Boom! The entire spiritual palace shook as flames of death covered it. Emperor Zimu's little world instantly shattered, and it only managed to block 60% of the Emperor of Death's self-destruction. Emperor Zimu found that the power of the self-destruction was 30 to 40% weaker than he expected. The Void Ocean Spiritual Palace had turned into ruins, and over half of the experts died. Petty tricks. A youth with scarlet golden wings appeared over the limitless ocean. Zhao Feng had used extreme speed in order to escape from the self-destruction. At the same time, his god's spiritual eye locked on to a black dot far away. Looking closely, it was a tattered Yuan soul that released death undulations, and a pair of eyes of death also floated in the air. Sky-locking bow soul lock. Zhao Feng pulled open the dark silver bow, and a gold and silver arrow shot through the air. Whoosh! The Yuan soul that had only escaped several hundred miles struggled in the air. So that's how it is. Emperor Zimu looked at Zhao Feng's actions and the Yuan soul stuck in the middle of the air. No wonder the Emperor of Death's self-destruction wasn't as powerful as he thought it would be. The Void God realm represented a change in the soul, and emperors had reached a peak. The Emperor of Death's strongest foundation was his soul, but he was unlucky that he had met Zhao Feng. Zhao Feng's eye bloodline was also soul-based, and he had the sky-locking bow. Even after locking on to the Emperor of Death's Yuan soul, Zhao Feng didn't underestimate him. Master? The child demigod suddenly appeared, and Zhao Feng looked at him in puzzlement. What kind of suggestion did this guy have? The Emperor of Death's eyes of death can be inherited. Can Master steal his eye bloodline for me? The child demigod was extremely moved. He cultivated body-strengthening techniques, and his soul was his weakness. However, if the child demigod was able to obtain the soul-based eyes of death and combine it with his golden Kuan sacred body, it would be perfect. Eyes of death. Zhao Feng felt his eye bloodline twitch in excitement. In the air, the Yuan soul that was unable to move had a pair of pitch-black eyes, which existed between the physical dimension and soul dimension. It was similar to when Zhao Feng's god's eye left his body. Instinct told him that the eyes of death would be helpful to him. Meow meow. The little thieving cat also appeared and waved its paws as if trying to tell Zhao Feng something. This cat! The child demigod gnashed his teeth. The little thieving cat was telling Zhao Feng to not give the eyes of death to the child demigod. Meow. The little thieving cat's suggestion was to immediately kill the Emperor of Death. Zhao Feng, if I die, you will too. The Yuan soul that was unable to move started to burn as it summoned the power of death. Not good. The expressions of Zhao Feng and company who were closing in changed dramatically as they felt a critical sense of danger. One had to know that the Emperor of Death's soul was unrivaled amongst emperors, and in terms of understanding of the soul, he even surpassed some sacred lords. Meow! The little thieving cat quickly reacted and hid into Zhao Feng's metal ring, but the child demigod had been thinking about how to obtain the eyes of death and was caught off guard. Boom! All of heaven and earth fell into darkness as a power similar to the death force field covered the area. The difference was that this power was aimed more at the soul. Arg! The child demigod screamed as his soul aura went out like a candle being extinguished, and he fell from the air into the limitless ocean. Zhao Feng's soul sea started to shake as he faced the explosion of an emperor's soul. This force was able to severely injure the souls of even mystic light realm sacred lords. Zhao Feng groaned in pain. Although his god spiritual eye was extremely resilient against soul attacks, it was relative. If a soul attack was too strong, his god spiritual eye wouldn't be able to block it. Little thieving cat. Child demigod. Zhao Feng exclaimed. The little thieving cat reacted quickly and managed to escape into the ancient metal ring, which was another dimension. As for the child demigod, Zhao Feng couldn't feel his aura anymore. Whoosh! A pair of black eyes turned into a blurry streak and instantly flew 10,000 miles away. Eyes of death and death intent. Zhao Feng's expression became grim. He didn't expect that the Emperor of Death had a technique similar to shedding his shell. Over 95% of the Emperor of Death's soul strength was destroyed in the explosion just now, but his core death intent and memories were hidden within the eyes of death. Whoosh! The eyes of death flew extremely quickly, and they existed between the physical and soul dimensions. They were much faster than Zhao Feng's lightning wing spatial flash because the speed of Yuan souls was usually 10 times greater than normal flying, and in his current state, the Emperor of Death's speed was 5 times faster than even that. Let's see how long you can last. Zhao Feng decided that he couldn't let the Emperor of Death off so easily, but killing him straight away would be too kind. Lightning wing's spatial flash. Wings formed behind Zhao Feng's back and allowed him to flash 10,000 miles away in one go. He wasn't worried that the Emperor of Death would be able to escape because over 95% of the Emperor of Death's soul power had already been destroyed, so he couldn't maintain flight for very long. The Emperor of Death only has one method of survival. Zhao Feng's heart was clear. After his physical form was destroyed and he lost most of his soul power, the only way the Emperor of Death could survive was to steal someone's body. In reality, the Emperor of Death had done such a thing twice before, so he was pretty experienced, but this time around, the difficulty would be extremely high. Even the self-destruction of my soul didn't damage Zhao Feng much. His eye bloodline specializes in tracking, and he's also extremely fast. The Emperor of Death cried bitterly in his heart. Even if it was a sacred lord, the Emperor of Death would have been able to escape by now with 2 shell-shedding explosions. The shadow of the death god and 2 self-explosions would be extremely troublesome even for normal sacred lords, but unfortunately, his advantage in the soul was perfectly countered by Zhao Feng. An hour later, the eyes of death managed to pull away from Zhao Feng, but most of his intent had been used up. He headed toward a populated island. I'll be able to rise once more after stealing another body. The Emperor of Death saw hope of new life. Once he stole a body, he wouldn't need to worry about talent or anything else because of his eye of death. A while later, within some country's palace, a dark beam of light flashed by. Anyone that hadn't reached the origin core realm wouldn't be able to sense anything. Good. I stole the body of a prince this time. The Emperor of Death was slightly happy. The strength of this country was on par with the Canopy Great Country, and it wouldn't be easily found. If he had chosen a 1-star or 2-star force, it would be risky, but the identity of a prince wasn't too bad. Once he entered a 1-star or 2-star force in the future, there would be countless resources. Without using any effort at all, the Emperor of Death successfully managed to steal the body of a prince or more accurately, an illegitimate child. Zhe, even if you're trash, I will make you rise and defy the heavens. The Emperor of Death started to merge with the memories of this body. At the same time, he circulated a secret technique to conceal his aura. To make sure everything would be perfect, the Emperor of Death boarded a carriage, exited the palace, and entered a quiet forest. Suddenly, the Emperor of Death's body froze. In the forest sat a purple-haired youth and a little cat who were both roasting the meat of a wild boar. The crispy boar meat released an enticing smell that made the Emperor of Death's hungry body instinctively gulp down his saliva. Zhao Feng, be nice to others. The Emperor of Death's breathing rate quickened, and his eyes were full of deadliness and despair. He only just stole a body. Apart from the fact that he had strong intent, he probably wouldn't even be a match for a true spirit realm. Zhao Feng remained expressionless as he took a bite of the meat, then started to inspect the Emperor of Death and his new body. Once a void god realm stole another body, everything became simple. Zhao Feng's left eye opened and covered the Emperor of Death's soul and body in a freezing coldness. He was very interested in the Emperor of Death's techniques and his Eye of Death. Zhao Feng, if I die, you will too, because I set down the cursed words of death a very long time ago. The Emperor of Death's face was poisonous as he started to threaten Zhao Feng. He didn't have any hope at all against Zhao Feng, so if he had to die, he wouldn't make Zhao Feng feel good either. Cursed words of death? Zhao Feng's eyebrows locked together. He had inspected the Dark Eye secret manual before, so he knew a bit about the cursed words of death. The cursed words of death was the most terrifying type of curse, and it required a life to activate. The origin of the cursed words of death is a forbidden and extinct species of the 10,000 ancient races, the ancient shaman race. The ranking of this race is even higher than the Heaven's Legacy race. It's only below that of the ancient race. The Emperor of Death's face became cold and Zhao Feng's expression changed slightly, but the killing intent in his eyes didn't waver. Not only was he going to kill the Emperor of Death, he was going to torture him and steal his Eye of Death and his memories. Ha ha ha! The Emperor of Death started to laugh in despair as he circulated his intent and soul. His opponent was cold and calm. Even the cursed words of death was unable to frighten him away. Not good. Zhao Feng wanted to stop him, but it was too late. He didn't expect the Emperor of Death to immediately commit suicide. Using the price of death, I shall leave behind a nightmare of endless withering and weakening onto my foe. A voice seemed to resound across heaven and earth. At this moment in time, the Emperor of Death had truly died. Along with his death was also his consciousness and his Eye of Death. The stronger the owner of the Eye of Death, the more powerful the cursed words of death would be. In theory, the power of the cursed words of death was effective against experts within 2 large realms. This was also why normal sacred lords didn't want to offend the Emperor of Death, who had such ancient and forbidden techniques. Plop! The stolen body of the Emperor of Death fell to the ground. Sii. Zhao Feng groaned as he felt a cold and indescribable power seep into his soul. The feeling was itchy and painful, and it went straight into his heart. When Zhao Feng opened his god's spiritual eye, he saw that there were wisps of black light in his body that started to erode even his soul. It was hard to describe the origin of these black lights or how they existed. The power was similar to the power of the curse of a ghost corpse, but countless times more profound. Cursed words of death. Such a forbidden technique actually exists? Zhao Feng took a deep breath. The moment he was hit by this technique, he felt as if insects had swarmed all over him. At this instant, Zhao Feng felt his soul, life force, true yuan, and cultivation slowly start to wither. Luckily, his mystic ice-scaled race bloodline and God's spiritual eye were somewhat resistant against the cursed words of death. The weakening speed of normal kings would be 10 times or even a dozen times faster than Zhao Feng. Zhao Feng sat down for half a day, but he could do nothing about the cursed words of death. He couldn't figure out how the power of the curse even existed, and he was unable to affect it. I don't understand the cursed words of death at all. I'll go back to the Azure Flower continent first. Maybe the sage can tell me something, Zhao Feng thought. In the depths of the limitless ocean, Galugulu. A thin stream of bubbles and the sound of choking appeared. Several breaths later, a pale-faced 4-year-old child appeared above the ocean. I'm not dead? The dark heart seed has disappeared. Could it be from the self-destruction of the Emperor of Death's soul? The child stood in the air and murmured to himself. Under the self-destruction of the Emperor of Death, the child demigod's soul had almost been completely destroyed in an instant, and he fell into the ocean. Even he thought that he had died. The dark heart seed had disappeared as well. At this moment in time, the child demigod managed to barely survive, but his aura was extremely weak. It's all thanks to the Golden Kuin's sacred body. Part of my consciousness is ingrained into my body, the child demigod murmured. When one reached the later stages of the Golden Kuin's sacred body, the soul and body would become one. As long as the body wasn't destroyed, the soul wouldn't be either. At this moment, a ship was passing by. Grandfather, what's that? A young girl looked at the child with a pale face. Ha 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 ha! The child floated in the air, and his smile was extremely deadly and evil. I, the demigod Kuin Yun, will rise again once more. In a small corner of the world, the demigod Kuin Yun had escaped his chains and was now free once more. Without any restrictions or limitations, what kind of change would the demigod Kuin Yun bring to the world? Whoosh! The child demigod disappeared from where he originally stood. The next instant, cries and screams came from the ship. From today onward, I am the captain of this ship. Anyone that disobeys me shall be killed. The child demigod's great physical strength dominated the ship. The strongest cultivator within the ship had only reached the peak sovereign lord rank, and he was just a measly ant in the child demigod's eyes. After taking control of the ship, the child demigod ordered the ship to head in a certain direction with its fastest speed. The child demigod knew that he wasn't Zhao Feng's match. The strength that Zhao Feng displayed in that very last instant was able to threaten even those at the mystic light realm. The child demigod decided that he would take on a new identity and recover his cultivation to the mystic light realm first before doing anything else. Otherwise, it'd be bad for him if he met Zhao Feng. When the child demigod thought about the master that had enslaved him, he was full of fear and hatred, but he didn't dare to have any thoughts of retaliation or revenge in the short term. Right now, the most important thing was to protect himself. Whoosh! The ship left the range of Emperor Zimu's Void Ocean Spiritual Palace. No one realized that there was an extra child on the ship. The child demigod was smart. He didn't fly just in case his aura was left behind. Instead, he used a ship to escape. Over the last half a year during the pursuit of the Emperor of Death, he learned Zhao Feng's tracking tactics extremely well, so he knew what to do. Half a day later, a purple-haired youth flew into this area. This should be the place where the Emperor of Death self-destructed, Zhao Feng murmured. On his shoulder sat a silver-gray cat. Zhao Feng opened his god's spiritual eye and inspected the area around him, placing emphasis on the ocean. A while later, Zhao Feng's expression changed slightly. He didn't find the child demigod's corpse. He remembered very clearly that the child demigod's soul had crumbled under the Emperor of Death's self-destruction. Zhao Feng's thoughts started to spin. If it was the scenario he was thinking of, then the child demigod's luck was far too good. In comparison, Zhao Feng was far unluckier. He was hit by the cursed words of death. The cursed words of death was extremely unique. It didn't matter whether Zhao Feng was the one who killed the Emperor of Death or whether it was suicide because the curse had already been set up before his death. The person who the Emperor of Death hated the most would be hit by the cursed words of death, no matter how far they were. Couldn't be avoided. Therefore, Zhao Feng could do nothing to stop it. The only thing he could have done was not kill him in the first place, but if Zhao Feng was given the option again, he would still kill the Emperor of Death. How humiliating was it to be chased for 7 years. Furthermore, if the Emperor of Death didn't die, he would forever be a source of danger. He might contact other emperors within the 10,000 Woods Sacred Land or even Mystic Light Realm Sacred Lords in order to obtain the 9th God's Eye. Therefore, Zhao Feng didn't regret his decision. The child demigod's disappearance was an accident, But Zhao Feng was too lazy to care about what kind of influence the demigod Kuan Yun might bring to the Tsang Ocean. Damn it! The more I use my true yuan, the stronger the withering becomes. The itchy and painful feeling was always present within Zhao Feng's body. He had even tried to seal his body in ice, but that did nothing. The cursed words of death came from the number 2 race of the 10,000 ancient races, the ancient shaman race. This race was extremely mysterious, and it excelled in the soul. In the ancient era, shamans and curses were feared by all. The stronger the person using the cursed words of death, the more powerful it would be. The Emperor of Death was an emperor, and he even had the Eye of Death to activate the cursed words of death. Even demigods wouldn't be able to evade it. Whoosh! Zhao Feng spread his wings and headed toward the nearby Void Ocean Spiritual Palace. Left-eyed Heavenly Emperor. Emperor Zimu was looking after the wounded in the shambles left behind. Zhao Feng's arrival made Emperor Zimu and many others go cold. Can the zone teleportation array still be used? Zhao Feng asked. The zone teleportation array has strong protective arrays around it, so it's still usable, Emperor Zimu said respectfully. Zhao Feng started to talk with Emperor Zimu. After learning that the Emperor of Death had been killed, Emperor Zimu was shocked. Then he let out a long breath. If the Emperor of Death didn't die, he would definitely remember Emperor Zimu. Don't worry, Brother Zhao. I'll help you deal with the issues of using the zone teleportation arrays, including the one within the floating dream sacred land. Emperor Zimu was extremely warm. He would obviously try his best to form a good relationship with Zhao Feng, who had limitless potential and strength. He didn't pay too much attention to Zhao Feng's weakness. After all, the Emperor of Death was one of the oldest emperors in the Tsang Ocean, so killing him would obviously cost a heavy price. Emperor Zimu was one of those who swayed very easily. He gave Zhao Feng many presents, and he even supplied the primal crystal stones needed to use the zone teleportation array. Half a month later, with the help of Emperor Zimu, Zhao Feng arrived at the floating dream sacred land. Several 2-star sects and even the 3-star force invited Zhao Feng to join them, but they were all declined by Zhao Feng. He then used the spiritual zone teleportation array and headed toward the true martial sacred land. In order to form a good relationship with Zhao Feng, Emperor Zimu once again paid for the usage of the array, and Zhao Feng needed these primal crystal stones anyway, so he agreed. Emperor Zimu was secretly overjoyed. Taking these primal crystal stones meant that Zhao Feng owed him half a favor. Before he left, Emperor Zimu asked where Zhao Feng came from. Zhao Feng replied that he came from the mystic true sacred clan, and he didn't say anything about the Azure Flower continent. There were countless islands in the 3 spiritual zones, and Zhao Feng never mentioned anything about the Azure Flower continent. Even the Emperor of Death and the child demigod didn't know where he came from. The reason Zhao Feng did this was because he didn't want to bring trouble to his home continent. If I have time, I'll go to the mystic true sacred clan and ask Brother Zhao for pointers. Emperor Zimu respectfully sent Zhao Feng away, but he didn't expect that Zhao Feng had no plans to stay behind at the mystic true sacred clan at all. After returning to the true martial sacred land, Zhao Feng was able to use the spiritual zone teleportation array since he was a king. However, he didn't immediately return to the Azure Green Islands zone or the nearby Tianlu Islands zone. He first went to the eternally sealed Void Ocean Spiritual Palace. The whole reason he was able to enter the true martial sacred land and see Duanmu Qing was because he had the help of the eternally sealed Palace Lord. Zhao Feng saw the eternally sealed Palace Lord extremely soon. The future is to be feared. In just a short couple years, you have become a king, the eternally sealed Palace Lord sighed. But Zhao Feng couldn't tell him about the bitterness in his heart. The cursed words of death was probably the strongest curse in the Tsang Ocean. Over the past couple days, Zhao Feng had concealed his aura and didn't use his soul strength or his true yuan in order to avoid increasing the rate of the withering. The mystic ice-scaled race bloodline and the god spiritual eye instinctively tried to block the curse as well, otherwise Zhao Feng would have turned into a withered elder already, and his cultivation would have dropped to the origin core realm. Zhao Feng only stayed at the Void Ocean Spiritual Palace for a couple days. In order to thank the eternally sealed Palace Lord, Zhao Feng gave him several treasures, such as the Immortal Springs wine, purple scaled grass, and various items taken from other kings. The most precious one amongst them was a fruit from the ancient dream realm. Zhao Feng could tell that the eternally sealed palace lord's cultivation was limitlessly close to the void god realm, and these treasures could help him create a solid foundation to break through to become a king. After staying for a couple days, Zhao Feng left. A month later, on the Azure Flower continent within the Azure Green Islands, whoosh, an arc of lightning flew down like a meteor and formed a crater where he landed. Where is this? Although Zhao Feng was born in the Azure Flower continent, he hadn't actually been to many places. Zhao Feng first inspected the aura of his soul and body. Unknowingly, his cultivation had fallen to the early stages of the void god realm. Whoosh! Zhao Feng flew into the sky and looked down from above as he matched the landscape with the map in his mind. The Western continent, Thousand Desert Great Country. Zhao Feng soon confirmed his location. Skeletal Division Leader, Zhao Feng said, and a dark mist started to appear next to him. A completely silver and white skeleton with a pair of red flaming eyes appeared from the mist. After being changed by the bloodline in the Heaven's Legacy City, the Skeletal Division Leader's shape had changed dramatically. Master, we're on the Azure Flower continent? The Skeletal Division Leader was extremely excited as he felt the familiar aura. Skeletal Division Leader, when I arrived at the Azure Flower continent, I felt that the forces of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion are starting to reawaken. Zhao Feng's eyes twinkled. Even if he didn't purposely spread his divine sense, he could feel the change in aura of the Azure Flower continent due to his void god realm cultivation. Whoosh! A transparent scarlet token appeared in the Skeletal Division Leader's hand, and it extended its senses into the token. Master, in just the Western continent alone, I feel many experts of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion's upper echelon. The Skeletal Division Leader was surprised. It admired Zhao Feng from the bottom of its heart. If it had to choose between the Scarlet Moon demonic religion or Zhao Feng, the Skeletal Division Leader would definitely choose Zhao Feng. Zhao Feng was silent for a moment before speaking. I'll leave the task of collecting the Scarlet Moon demonic religion to you. Understood, Master. The Skeletal Division Leader was full of excitement and surprise as it bowed. It was obvious that Zhao Feng wanted it to take control of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion and turn their forces into its own. Instead of killing everyone, it was better to make them subordinates. In reality, the reason Zhao Feng came back was just to find the sage to answer his questions. As for the Scarlet Moon demonic religion, it was just on the way, so he gave it to the Skeletal Division Leader. Besides, Zhao Feng didn't want to attack as much as possible since it would increase the rate of his withering. Over the past few days, Zhao Feng learned a bit about the characteristics of the cursed words of death. What weakened wasn't only his cultivation. His body, soul, and even his lifespan were decreasing. Of course, there were still things that the cursed words of death couldn't erode. The first was the god's spiritual eye. Although the strength of his eye bloodline power was weakening, the god's spiritual eye itself was just being blocked by the cursed words of death, including the whirlpool in the dimension of his left eye that was connected to the ancient dream realm. The second thing was the god tribulation lightning. The cursed words of death was unable to erode the area where the god tribulation lightning was stored. It could be said that these two places were forbidden zones in Zhao Feng's body. Apart from them, even Zhao Feng's mystic ice-scaled race bloodline wasn't able to avoid the withering. At best, it only had stronger resistance. If it wasn't for this, I could have found a quiet place to recultivate with the 5 elemental wind lightning technique and the golden Kuin's sacred lightning body already. Zhao Feng sighed in his heart. Shua! Shua! The perfected version of the golden Kuin sacred lightning body and the 5 elemental wind lightning technique appeared in his mind. Zhao Feng had almost completely finished cultivating the wind lightning inheritance. The limit of the original wind lightning inheritance was at the level of an emperor. There was a slight chance to break through to the mystic light realm, but after that, it would definitely be the end. On the other hand, the golden Kuin's sacred lightning body and the 5 elemental wind lightning technique had been created by fusing several ancient skills that could be cultivated to the heavenly divine realm. Skills that were able to be cultivated to the heavenly divine realm were already extremely rare, and these two were a pair that complemented each other. The 5-elemental wind-lightning technique was used to train the sacred lightning body. However, the problem was that Xiaofeng had already cultivated the wind-lightning inheritance, which was very different from the 5-elemental wind-lightning technique. In order to cultivate the 5-elemental wind-lightning technique, Xiaofeng needed to restart his cultivation from the beginning. According to his original plan, after finally dealing with the pursuit of death, Xiaofeng would immediately find somewhere quiet and restart his cultivation. After all, the wind-lightning inheritance had reached its limit, and the other two skills had far more potential. At most, Xiaofeng would only need 10 years to recover his strength, but he never expected that the Emperor of Death would use the skill Cursed Words of Death. Once the user activated it, they would die, but the target would be unable to avoid it, and they would die as well. Right now, Xiaofeng was worried that the Cursed Words of Death would accompany him even if he started to recultivate. Master, I sense that the upper echelon of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion is doing something big in the northeastern direction. The skeletal division leader's voice broke Xiaofeng's train of thought. Let's go. Xiaofeng didn't hesitate at all. He wanted to head to the northern continent anyway. The skeletal division leader led the way at the front as they flew toward the northeastern direction. A while later, the two arrived at their destination. Below them, a huge battle was ongoing in the middle of a mine. Zhe, cunning rabbits and helpers of the Sacred Alliance, you have finally fallen into the net of the great Scarlet Moon demonic religion. 3 upper echelon members of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion were floating in midair. The one in the middle was an elder with a pair of bat wings behind his back, and he had a very smug expression on his face. On his left and right were a sovereign in black robes and a female with a pale face respectively. They looked down from above and unleashed a barrage of attacks as several hundred elites of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion surrounded a 100-mile radius. It's one of the 4 protectors of the religion, the Bat King. The skeletal division leader revealed a weird expression. It also knew the male sovereign in black. He was another division leader. The skeletal division leader didn't know the female. She might be new. On the other side, a giant middle-aged male at the half-step origin core realm and a sovereign wielding a sword were in a difficult battle. The sovereign with the sword had extremely strong attacks, and his battle power was close to the peak small origin core realm, but he was the only sovereign on their side. Mystic Sword Sovereign. Xiaofeng immediately recognized this sovereign's identity. He had a strong impression of the Mystic Sword Sovereign. It was the Mystic Sword Sovereign that had taken away the 7-sword incomplete manual, and he was one of the 9 sovereigns at the Sacred True Dragon Gathering. Mystic Sword Sovereign, it is my Xianxia's fault. Even if I die, I will fight a path for you to escape. A layer of stone skin condensed around the giant middle-aged male. Although he was only at the half-step origin core realm, his bloodline and physical body were extremely strong so he could block basic attacks. Xiaofeng somehow felt that this male looked familiar. Father, if you die, then we'll die together. A large youth in the crowd made the elites of the demonic religion cough out blood. Indeed worthy of being one of the overwhelming prodigies of the Sacred True Dragon Gathering. Everyone, watch out for his gravity field. Several true lord ranks of the demonic religion were attacking the large youth. Xianxia. Xiaofeng's eyes landed on the youth. Xianxia? Xianxia? Xiaofeng instantly understood. The middle-aged male was Xianxia's father. Xianxia's cultivation had reached the peak true lord rank, and his battle power was comparable to the half-step origin core realm. There's no use. They have 3 sovereigns, and one of them is one of the 4 great protectors of the demonic religion, the Bat King. The Mystic Sword Sovereign smiled bitterly. Not only had the Bat King reached the peak small origin core realm, his bloodline was also extremely unique, and he was famous for his speed. No one present would be able to escape from the Bat King. Even now, the Bat King was just floating in the sky without attacking. Just 2 sovereigns and a group of elites from the demonic religion were already suppressing the Mystic Sword Sovereign and those from the Shur family. Which upper echelon member of the sacred religion is here? The Bat King suddenly sensed something and turned his gaze toward the clouds. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 figures floated down from the clouds. It was a silver-white skeleton and an expressionless purple-haired youth. Division Leader Yogu. Division Leader Yogu. Haven't you been missing for the last couple years? The Bat King and the black-robed sovereign recognized the skeletal division leader's identity, even though it looked slightly different. Another sovereign from the Scarlet Moon demonic religion has arrived. The hearts of the mystic sword sovereign and the Shi family experts shook. Zhao Feng. Shi Changtian, who was fighting, saw Zhao Feng from the corner of his eyes and almost fell over. Zhao Feng was standing right next to an upper echelon member of the demonic religion and seemed to be extremely familiar with it. Zhao Feng, you joined the Scarlet Moon demonic religion? Shi Changtian roared. Zhao Feng, the mystic sword sovereign exclaimed. Of course he remembered the bright star of the Sacred Alliance. In his mind, Zhao Feng was still the deputy patriarch of the Iron Blood religion, but no news of him had been heard over the past few years. Why would such a prodigy join the Scarlet Moon demonic religion? Zhao Feng? The overwhelming prodigy from the last sacred true dragon gathering. Zhe, Division Leader Yogu. You actually managed to get a genius with limitless potential to join us? Those from the Scarlet Moon demonic religion had weird expressions. At this moment, the battle paused. The descent of another sovereign from the Scarlet Moon demonic religion instantly tipped the balance and made the mystic sword sovereign and the Shi family fall into despair. Furthermore, an overwhelming prodigy joining the Scarlet Moon demonic religion shocked them as well. Bat King, the skeletal division leader's voice was cold. I've come this time under orders from Master to take control of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion. After saying this, it bowed and raised its hand toward the purple-haired youth next to him. What, Master? Take control of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion? Division Leader Yogu, have you eaten the wrong medicine? The Bat King and company were stunned, and they roared in anger. The mystic sword sovereign, Shi Changtian, and company were all puzzled and dazed. What was going on? Could the Scarlet Moon demonic religion be having internal problems? Were they about to start fighting amongst themselves? Of course, they were happy to see this, and they had time to breathe. Humph! The skeletal division leader snickered coldly as its bones released an overwhelming power. The Bat King and the other two upper echelons felt a massive pressure on their bones and blood, as if they were about to shatter at any moment. Wah! The Bat King at the very front spat out a mouthful of blood. Plop! Plop! The other two sovereigns felt their bones break, and they fell to the ground. Division Leader Yogu, you? The Bat King's face was pure red, and he felt unable to breathe as he looked at the skeletal division leader in shock. Both friend and foe alike were dead silent. One could hear a pin drop. This sudden change confused everybody, and they didn't know what to do. An indescribable force started to radiate from the skeletal division leader, and both friend and foe alike felt extremely pressured. Anyone below the origin core realm wasn't even able to breathe. Sovereign Lord! The Bat King was stunned as he was forced onto the ground by the pressure. The number of sovereign lords in the entire Azure Flower continent doesn't exceed 5 people. The mystic sword sovereign took in a cold breath, and instinct told him that the skeletal division leader wasn't just a simple sovereign lord rank. The mystic sword sovereign had seen sovereign lords before, but the pressure he felt from them was nowhere near as strong as what he felt from the skeletal division leader. Master, what should I do with these people? After using unrivaled strength to suppress everyone present, the skeletal division leader respectfully asked Zhao Feng. Master, looking at the skeletal division leader's respectful expression, the Bat King, the mystic sword sovereign, and company were all stunned. Only now did they realize that this expressionless and quiet youth was Master. Zhao Feng. The mystic sword sovereign, Shi Changtian, and company were speechless. From the beginning, Zhao Feng only stood next to the skeletal division leader without saying anything, so he had been ignored. Only now did everyone's gaze lock on to this overwhelming prodigy. Skeletal division leader, Zhao Feng said in a slightly unhappy tone, I've already given you the task of taking control of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion. Are you going to ask me about every little tiny thing? Yes. The skeletal division leader couldn't help but hiccup coldly and curse itself for being dumb. After all the waves Xiaofeng had been through, the Azure Flower Continent and the Scarlet Moon demonic religion were nothing in comparison. It had already sensed that Xiaofeng wasn't very interested in the Scarlet Moon demonic religion, which is why it was currently in charge. Being a slave that was under orders from Master, it should do some things to the best of its ability. Little tiny thing? The faces of the Mystic Sword Sovereign and company twitched, and the Bat King and company looked at each other in shock. It was as if the fight for the continent was just child's play in Zhao Feng's eyes. The sovereigns present couldn't see through Zhao Feng, and he even seemed to be sick at the moment. Zhe. Bat King and the rest of you. All of you only have two choices, either bow down to me or die. The skeletal division leader laughed coldly and shifted its expression. It had been taking orders from Zhao Feng for a long time, and it was finally returning to what it used to be like. You are betraying the patriarch. The female with a pale face gritted her teeth and said, Die! A deadly red light flashed through the skeletal division leader's eyes. Boom! A large dark silver skeletal hand smashed down from the sky and crushed the female into a meat paste. The female didn't even have time to scream. Sii. The experts from both sides all took in a cold breath. He's way too strong. Division leader Yogu is probably at least at the peak Great Origin Core realm. Apart from the Patriarch, no one else would be able to handle him. The Bat King and the Sovereign in Black were stunned. If the skeletal division leader's strength was already so monstrous, then how strong was the master Zhao Feng? After thinking about it, the two decided to bow for now, and most of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion elites did so too. However, a small number of elites tried to escape. Boom! Boom! Before these elites managed to run even half a mile, an intent descended from the sky and destroyed their souls. Void God intent. It's at least half-step king intent. Only the Patriarch has such a thing. The faces of the Bat King and company were white. They were originally planning to escape, but after seeing the skeletal division leader's true power, they couldn't help but feel lucky. In just a short while, the skeletal division leader had taken control over this group of cultivators from the Scarlet Moon demonic religion, including the two sovereigns. Origin Core realm experts were extremely rare in the Azure Flower Continent. Those at the True Lord rank were already people that could rule an entire area. As for sovereign lords at the Great Origin Core realm, the total amount didn't exceed the number of fingers on one hand. Everyone was limited by the Azure Flower Continent's environment. Sovereign lords were rare even in the nearby two-star forces. The skeletal division leader's cultivation had managed to barely squeeze into the half-step king rank. Zhao Feng. Shi Changtian led his father Shi Yuntian and greeted Zhao Feng, and they expressed their gratitude. If Zhao Feng wasn't here, the Shi family probably would have become extinct. The Mystic Sword Sovereign and the other experts of the Sacred Alliance had complex expressions that contained wariness. Zhao Feng's goal was to take control over the Scarlet Moon demonic religion. If he really succeeded, who knew whether he'd become the second Scarlet Moon demonic religion patriarch or what kind of disaster would befall the continent. Zhao Feng, right now, the entire continent is attacking the forces of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion. Aren't you scared that they'll run out of your control? Why not team up with the Sacred Alliance and destroy the Scarlet Moon demonic religion completely? The Mystic Sword Sovereign suggested. My slave is now in control of everything regarding the Scarlet Moon demonic religion. I'm not interested in any of it, Zhao Feng said, and the Mystic Sword Sovereign sighed. This was the first time he had seen Zhao Feng since the Sacred True Dragon gathering, and he couldn't see through him at all. Zhao Feng then learned about the situation of the Azure Flower Continent from the Mystic Sword Sovereign and Shi Changtian. The forces of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion were reviving and spreading. Although the Sacred Alliance and the 10 Great Clans had a big advantage, they had basically lost control of the situation. How are the forces of the demonic religion recovering so fast? Zhao Feng cut straight to the point. When the demonic religion was defeated several hundred years ago, only a tiny bit of their forces remained. The Moon Demon Palace is supporting them, and the Scarlet Moon demonic religion patriarch controls the entrance to the Scarlet Moon inheritance to a certain degree, so he is able to send some people in every couple years. The Mystic Sword Sovereign sighed. Moon Demon Palace? Zhao Feng's eyebrows locked together. He had interacted with them in the Purple Saint Ruins before, but Emperor Duanmu had punished them and made them give up on the Purple Saint Ruins. Looks like I'll need to head to the Moon Demon Palace sometime, Zhao Feng murmured. Hearing that, the eyes of the Mystic Sword Sovereign bulged out. It sounded like Zhao Feng was implying that he had already interacted with them before and was just going to head over and settle the trouble. Moon Demon Palace. That was a 2-star sect. 2-star sects were existences that the 10 great clans could only look up to. Of course, if the Mystic Sword Sovereign knew that Zhao Feng had once plundered an entire 2-star battlefield, he wouldn't be so worried. Even the Emperor of Death, who Zhao Feng had chased after and killed, could easily destroy normal 2-star sections. Zhao Feng then talked with Shi Chengtian a bit. Shi Chengtian admired Zhao Feng from the bottom of his heart. Zhao Feng mainly asked about the other overwhelming prodigies, with an emphasis on Yu Tianhao. Over 7 years had passed since he and Yu Tianhao made their 10-year deal. It had been more than 8 years since the Sacred True Dragon gathering, and he hadn't seen Yu Tianhao for quite some time. I don't think that Yu Tianhao has come back since then. Shi Chengtian shook his head and said, Yu Tianhao? On the other hand, the Mystic Sword Sovereign knew a bit. Apparently, it's like this. The origin of the Yu family comes from the legendary continent zone, but with the passage of time, all the branches of their family have spread across the limitless ocean. The Mystic Sword Sovereign said, Continent zone? Zhao Feng couldn't help but be somewhat surprised. Apparently, after the fight 7 years ago, Yu Tianhao left the Azure Flower continent and entered one of the Yu branch families nearby. The strength of this Yu branch family was close to a 2-star sect. I heard Yu Xingxian say that Yu Tianhao's bloodline and talent are unrivaled. He might be sent to the main Yu family in the continent zone. The Mystic Sword Saint said, and Zhao Feng understood. The Yu family should be similar to the Duanmu family, forces of the dynasty. The whole reason Duanmu Qing took Zhao Yufei to the continent zone was to try to revive the Duanmu family. Continent zone? Looks like my battle with Yu Tianhao might be pushed back a bit, Zhao Feng murmured. The original deal was that they would fight after 10 years. This meant that it could be 10 years, but it could also be 15 or even 20. Zhao Feng agreed to Zhao Yufei and Duanmu Qing that he would go to the continent zone after solving the issue with Lu Qinxin. Zhao Feng didn't stay very long in the Western continent. Skeletal Division Leader, I'll leave the Scarlet Moon demonic religion to you. Zhao Feng gave the 10,000 ghost pearl to the Skeletal Division Leader and left. There were 100 cursed ghost corpses within the 10,000 ghost pearl, including several at the Sovereign Lord rank. Don't worry, Master. It's just a measly Scarlet Moon demonic religion. The Skeletal Division Leader was full of excitement as it took the 10,000 ghost pearl. With the ghost corpse cursed array, it would be able to defeat anyone even if a king arrived. Shwa! 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 The Skeletal Division Leader waved its hand, and 10 cursed ghost corpses appeared. Each of their auras was comparable to the peak small origin core realm, and they had the power of the curse as well, which could threaten great origin core realm sovereign lords. Seeing 10 ghost corpses at the peak small origin core realm appear, the Bat King, the Mystic Sword Sovereign, and company couldn't help but hiccup coldly. With such strength, the Bat King and company didn't doubt that the Skeleton Division Leader had the ability to rule the continent. Whoosh! An arc of lightning flashed across the sky as Zhao Feng headed toward the northern continent alone. As for taking over the Scarlet Moon demonic religion, Zhao Feng had truly given all control to the Skeletal Division Leader. In just 4 hours, Zhao Feng flew from the western continent to the northern continent, and this was still under the fact that he was limiting the amount of true yuan he was using. Within the northern continent, in the Canopy Great Country, an arc of lightning flashed by. Zhao Feng's divine sense scanned through the Canopy Great Country and the main headquarters of the Iron Blood religion. There were some familiar faces within the main headquarters, and there were some new ones as well. He also found some forces of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion, but he was too lazy to bother with them. His goal was the 6 Warlock Tower in the Great Country proper, but he paused slightly when he reached the Thousand Water River area. This was his previous position. There were many powerful auras gathered in a mountain, and although they were trying to conceal themselves, Zhao Feng still managed to sense them. I heard that the forces of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion are spreading excessively around the Thousand Water River. Apparently, an upper echelon member has come and is planning something. We've found out where their stronghold is, and we can catch them off guard. Many of the top experts of the Canopy Great Country were here. The weakest person was at the true human rank. Zhao Feng's divine sense found Patriarch Hong and the blood-colored hair Tianma. Their auras were the strongest among those present. Empress Qin, Flooding Lake City Lord, Tian Yunji, Jiang Sanfeng. Zhao Feng saw many familiar faces. Over half of the experts came from the Iron Blood religion. Patriarch Hong and Tianma, the two leaders of the Iron Blood religion, led the forces of the great country. Zhao Feng's divine sense then scanned toward the stronghold of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion several thousand miles away, and his expression changed. Thinking up to here, he flashed into the mountain. The arrays nearby did nothing to him. At the same time, the Iron Blood religion's plan was complete. Within a stone room they had just created, the stronghold doesn't seem to be that simple. We should... Patriarch Hong and Tianma were planning something in the candlelight. At this exact point in time, a figure appeared between them. Who is it? Patriarch Hong and Tianma exclaimed and almost jumped up in fright. Who's there? Cold sweat instantly appeared on Patriarch Hong and Tianma. Who in the Azure Flower continent could appear between the two of them without them knowing? Under the candlelight, a purple-haired youth who seemed to be slightly sick appeared between the two. Zhao Feng. Patriarch Hong and Tianma acted as if they had seen a ghost. 7 years later, the once-upon-a-time overwhelming prodigy had appeared so suddenly in front of the two, as if he had been faking his death. Patriarch Hong, Deputy Patriarch, I hope the both of you have been well. Zhao Feng blinked his eyes and smiled. He had to admit that he purposely wanted to scare the two. Zhao Feng, you've come just in time. We're lacking top-tier experts. Patriarch Hong and Tianma were overjoyed. They didn't doubt Zhao Feng's strength. Just the fact that he could appear next to them without them knowing meant that Zhao Feng was at least at the origin core realm. Indeed, you've met some trouble. I was planning to go to the 6th Warlock Tower, but I saw you guys and the Scarlet Moon demonic religion forces on the way. Zhao Feng told them. Although he had given the task of taking over the Scarlet Moon demonic religion to the Skeletal Division leader, at the end of the day, he was the Iron Blood religion's deputy patriarch and wouldn't do nothing if he knew about it. You've also realized that this stronghold is different? Tianma asked in surprise. There seems to be 2 or 3 auras at the origin core realm there. Zhao Feng was slightly uncertain. When he flew past, he didn't search in depth, he only felt a general sense. Origin core realms. 3 of them. Patriarch Hong and Tianma looked at each other and couldn't help but take in a cold breath. Origin core realms ruled supreme in the Azure Flower continent. The entire Canopy Great Country only had Patriarch Hong for an origin core realm. The deputy patriarch Tianma was only at the half-step origin core realm, but his battle power was somewhat close to an origin core realm. After knowing this news, the expressions of Patriarch Hong and Tianma became solemn. Retreat and ask for reinforcements, both of them thought. The opponents had 3 sovereigns. Such a force had exceeded the limits of what they could handle. We need to ask the Sacred Alliance or the 10 Great Clans for help as soon as possible, Patriarch Hong said, but Tianma looked at Zhao Feng. He realized that when Zhao Feng mentioned 3 sovereigns, he was nonchalant about it. Tianma had witnessed Zhao Feng's rise, and instinct told him that Zhao Feng's strength was immeasurable and definitely not simple. There's no need for reinforcements. Since I'm here already, I might as well bring peace to the great country. Zhao Feng shook his head and said, might as well. Patriarch Hong and Tianma couldn't help but look at Zhao Feng and think, what big words. His tone was very casual. Zhao Feng, it's not that I'm suspecting your strength, but you seem to be sick. Can you really handle a multiple sovereigns? Patriarch Hong asked solemnly. 3 sovereigns wasn't a joke. If it went bad, the Iron Blood religion's name would be removed from the continent. Zhao Feng, does this mean you have the battle power of a sovereign lord? Tianma's eyes lit up. He understood Zhao Feng, and he knew that the latter wasn't arrogant. Sick? Yes, I'm indeed ill. As for those at the sovereign lord rank, I've slain many in the outside world. They shouldn't be much trouble. Zhao Feng shrugged his shoulders somewhat helplessly. Killed sovereign lords before? The eyes of Patriarch Hong and Tianma bulged out. If it was someone else, they would have thought he was lying. Okay, Zhao Feng, we believe you. Patriarch Hong and Tianma decided and started to plan when to attack, what tactics to use, and various other things. I'm kind of low on time since I need to get to the 6 Warlock Tower. Let's just attack right now, Zhao Feng suggested. Right now? The faces of Patriarch Hong and Tianma twitched. It was broad daylight right now. According to their initial plan, the Iron Blood religion was going to attack at night and catch the stronghold off guard. Right now, Zhao Feng's tone was very decisive before pausing for a moment. I can go by myself if you guys don't want to come. Patriarch Hong and Tianma looked at each other speechlessly. Zhao Feng seemed to be in a hurry. Fine. The two were helpless and immediately gathered the experts once more to discuss. However, this time there was a new major figure here. Zhao Feng, one of the 3 major figureheads of the Iron Blood religion, Deputy Patriarch Zhao. He's the overwhelming prodigy who's famed across the Azure Flower continent. Chaos broke out in the discussion hall. Deputy Patriarch Zhao. Some people had happy expressions, such as Jiang Sanfeng and company, but a small number of people had ugly expressions, such as Empress Qin and the head of the Lu family. Fenger. The body of the flooding Lake City Lord Lu Jutian shook. He had received news that Zhao Feng rejected the offer to join a 2-star sect and entered the limitless ocean in order to find Lu Qinxin. In the blink of an eye, more than 7 years had passed. During that period of time, there was no news of him at all. A true Lord rank genius entering the limitless ocean would obviously face a lot of danger. City Lord Lu. Zhao Feng went up to the flooding Lake City Lord and talked to him in person. Seeing that the flooding Lake City Lord had something on his mind but didn't say it, Zhao Feng instantly knew what he wanted to ask. I found traces of Qinxin's whereabouts. After we finish off this stronghold, I'll accompany City Lord Lu to the 6 Warlock Tower, Zhao Feng explained. Okay. The flooding Lake City Lord was extremely surprised. He didn't expect that Zhao Feng would actually find the whereabouts of Lu Qinxin. The main point of discussion was attacking the Scarlet Moon stronghold, and after knowing that they were going to attack immediately, chaos broke out. It wasn't hard to imagine that this was because Zhao Feng had arrived. Zhao Feng's every action and movement caught attention. None of the experts from the great country were able to see through him. It was obvious that Zhao Feng very likely had a cultivation of the origin core realm, or at least the battle power of a sovereign. Otherwise, the Iron Blood religion wouldn't be so confident in attacking the stronghold. Since no one knew that the Scarlet Moon stronghold had 3 origin core realms, they soon agreed. Whoosh! 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 The experts in the mountain flew into the air while others sat on their flying spiritual pets. For hours later, the group from the great country arrived at a complex area with a lot of water. In a concealed waterfall nearby, a measly sovereign dares to attack our stronghold? A skinny elder with blood-colored hair and robes stood with his hands behind his back and looked toward the sky. Zhezhe, they definitely wouldn't expect Elder Shueli and 2 other Origin Core Realm experts from the outside world to be here personally to reinforce us. This means we don't have to lure them in. A fatty in golden robes at the half-step Origin Core Realm said respectfully. In just a short while, bloodthirsty auras from the Scarlet Moon demonic religion appeared in front of the waterfall. Apart from that, there were also a mysterious elder with a blood-colored moon on his robes and a stunning girl in a faint red dress. The girl's beauty was peerless, and her snow-white legs and shoulders were revealed. Her every smile seemed to contain magic. There was a dark moon symbol on her forehead, and her purple hair blew in the wind, as if she was an elf. The males of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion couldn't help but swallow their saliva as they looked at the girl, but there was more respect in their eyes than lust. Even Elder Shueli's tone toward these 2 was very respectful. Whoosh! 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 The sound of flying appeared right at this moment. The experts from the Canopy Great Country led by the Iron Blood religion had arrived near the waterfall. Surround them. Kill all the spawn from the demonic religion, The elites from the Canopy Great Country had the advantage in numbers and instantly surrounded the place. Mockery appeared on Elder Shueli's face, and playfulness appeared on the faces of both the mysterious elder and charming girl. Who was the real hunter and hunted here? Ha 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 ha. Patriarch Hong, you rushed into the net yourself. The iron blood religion shall be removed from this continent. Elder Shueli laughed as his hair blew wildly in the wind, and the aura of a late-stage small origin core realm turned the sky red. It's Elder Shueli. He's extremely bloodthirsty. The upper echelon of those from the Canopy Great Country changed dramatically. Elders were definitely part of the upper echelon of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion. After we destroy these elites from the Canopy Great Country, the Scarlet Moon demonic religion will be able to truly stabilize their footing in the northern continent. A mysterious elder with a blood moon on his robes suddenly appeared in the clouds and gently raised his hand, forming a large blood moon that released a wave of moonlight and covered everything within 20 miles. It was as if heaven and earth had been switched. Both friend and foe alike were under a new sky. This kind of strength? Could it be a sovereign lord? Patriarch Hong and Tiamat both felt uneasy. They and the true spirit realm elites all felt their true yuan become restricted. What's going on? My true yuans become stronger. On the other hand, those from the Scarlet Moon demonic religion became much stronger. The game's just begun. The mysterious elder had an arrogant expression on his face. Right at this moment, Elder Shueli, who had been strengthened by the moonlight, roared and charged at Patriarch Hong. Boom! In the first blow alone, Patriarch Hong was pushed back. Elder Shueli was an expert cultivating the demonic Tao, and his battle power became stronger in the moonlight. The hearts of those from the Canopy Great Country went cold, and everyone watched out only for themselves. Empress Qin and company instinctively turned around and tried to escape. None of you will be able to leave. The mysterious girl in faint red blocked their paths. Origin Core Realm. Such a young Origin Core Realm. Empress Qin and company felt the pressure from a sovereign and felt cold. The group from the Great Country were filled with despair. They didn't expect this stronghold to have 3 sovereigns, one of whom might even be a sovereign lord. Zhao Feng! Tiamat exclaimed as the situation became dangerous. However, the gaze of the purple-haired youth locked on to the peerless beauty and said in a faint tone, Zhuang Wan'er. Zhuang Wan'er. The peerless beauty was a core disciple from the Moon Demon Palace that had once been in the Purple Saint Ruins, and she was on par with Yi Yanyu of the Pure Moon spiritual sect. After so many years, she had broken through to the Origin Core realm, and currently she was following an elder from the sect to reinforce the Scarlet Moon demonic religion. Hearing someone call her name, Zhuang Wan'er paused for a moment before looking toward a casual purple-haired youth in the group. Zhao Feng's appearance and aura had changed quite a lot after so long, and he seemed to be slightly sick. It's you! Fear and panic appeared on Zhuang Wan'er's face. The fear on her face seemed to come instinctively due to some memories in her mind. Back then, in the Purple Saint Ruins, Zhao Feng had comprehended the void space and was like a god of slaughter. Lu Tianyi, Elder Shui Yun, Grandmaster Yin Kong, and many other experts were killed in that nightmare. And now, that nightmare was right in front of her as the purple-haired youth smiled at her. Zhao Feng, why is he here? Zhuang Wan'er's face went white as fear overtook her. At this moment, she only had one thought remaining. Run! If Zhao Feng could slaughter them in the Purple Saint Ruins so badly 7 years ago, she didn't dare to guess what kind of improvements Zhao Feng had made since then. Elder Wu, retreat. Zhuang Wan'er quickly said as she flew into the air toward the mysterious elder with the blood moon on his robes. What's wrong? The elder was extremely puzzled. He had never seen Zhuang Wan'er act like this before. This scene raised the attention of Elder Shueli and company. A sovereign prodigy was scared by just 2 words? You want to run away? Zhao Feng mocked as he stepped forward and instantly blocked the elder and Zhuang Wan'er. He was planning to head to the Moon Demon Palace later anyway. He didn't expect to meet them so soon. Who are you? The elder had a solemn expression. Every action and movement from the youth in front of him brought a strong pressure. He had only felt such a thing from the Grand Elders of the Moon Demon Palace before. Pa! Zhao Feng slowly reached out his hand and pressed down on Zhuang Wan'er's shoulder. Just the aura of his bloodline and body sealed her true yuan. You! Zhuang Wan'er's face went red and white as she trembled. She didn't even have any ability to fight back. The youth in her sight perfectly synchronized with her nightmares. Stop! The elder roared as his sovereign lord rank aura changed the environment. Those fighting below all felt an indescribable sensation and found it difficult to breathe. Sovereign lord! Patriarch Hong and Elder Shui Li both stopped their fight as well. Patriarch Hong and Tianma were overjoyed. Just the appearance of Zhao Feng scared a sovereign, and with just one hand, he was able to control a sovereign and make the expression of a sovereign lord elder change dramatically. At this moment in time, facing the attack of a sovereign lord, Zhao Feng snickered. In an instant, a magnificent power covered the elder. Wah! The elder spat out a mouthful of blood as he felt his true yuan become restricted, and he couldn't even think about fighting back. You! The elder was full of fear, panic, and disbelief. He was even more scared than Zhuang Wan'er. What's going on? The elites of the Canopy Great Country and the Scarlet Moon demonic religion were dumbfounded. Zhao Feng didn't even do anything except snicker, and yet a sovereign lord coughed out blood. The magnificent power was restricted to a small area since he didn't want to use too much of his soul power. He wanted to rely more on pure intent. Although he had been hit by the cursed words of death, his comprehensions wouldn't fade away or weaken, just like the revived child demigod. In order of quickest withering to slowest, the cursed words of death affected life force, true yuan, the soul, and the body. One of the slowest things to weaken was emperor intent, which was based off his soul power. How is this power? Zhuang Wan'er's skin was touching Zhao Feng's, so she could feel the magnificent power from him. That brat's weird. Run! Elder Shui Li felt extremely uneasy. Even the elder from the Moon Demon Palace could do nothing against Zhao Feng. Whoosh! He turned into a streak of blood-colored light and sped toward the water. Humph! Zhao Feng faintly glanced in the direction of Elder Shui Li. Boom! An intent descended from the sky and landed on Elder Shui Li, as if it was punishment from the heavens. Arg! Elder Shui Li screamed as his soul shattered and his body fell from the sky. Plop! Elder Shui Li's corpse fell into the forests below, and this scene caused both friend and foe alike to go cold. Just a thought alone killed a sovereign. Patriarch Hong, Tianma, and company were dazed. No one else in the Azure Flower continent could do such a thing, including the Scarlet Moon demonic religion patriarch. Could it be? Patriarch Hong and Tianma looked at each other and thought of something they didn't dare to before. Sir King, we are dumb and beg for your forgiveness. The elder stuttered while Zhuang Wan'er didn't even dare to breathe loudly. The nightmare had now become an unrivaled nightmare. Void God Realm King. Such an existence was amongst the peak even in the Tsang Ocean, and it only existed in the legends on the Azure Flower continent. King. Zhao Feng's become a king. No wonder Deputy Patriarch Zhao could kill an elder of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion with just a thought. Those from the Canopy Great Country broke out into chaos. Patriarch Hong and Tianma looked at each other. Apart from shock, there was overwhelming joy. One had to know that the entire Azure Flower continent didn't even have a single Void God Realm King. The Iron Blood religion was the first to have one. How glorious was this? Patriarch Hong and Tianma couldn't help but feel lucky about how they had chosen Zhao Feng. The birth of a king was enough to turn the tide of the entire continent, and it was unstoppable. King! Empress Qin was dazed and felt as if she was in a dream. She couldn't believe it. On the other hand, those from the Scarlet Moon demonic religion fell into despair. Under the gaze of a king, they didn't even have the courage to run away. Elder Shui Li was a perfect example of what would happen. Sir King, if you have any requirements, just tell me, the elder said bitterly. At this point in time, Zhao Feng had removed his magnificent power, but the elder and Zhuang Wan'er didn't dare to have any other thoughts. Zhuang Wan'er shall stay behind while you go back to the Moon Demon Palace, and if you don't give me a good explanation within the next 100 days, I will kill her and remove the entire Moon Demon Palace from the Tsang Ocean. Zhao Feng spoke in a slow tone. Hearing this, the heart of the elder shook, especially when he heard that last line about removing the Moon Demon Palace from the Tsang Ocean. Facing Zhao Feng's cold and decisive voice, the elder had a ridiculous feeling, as if Zhao Feng actually had the ability to do so. Frankly, even if Zhao Feng's strength dropped below the Void God realm, there wouldn't be too much difficulty in destroying the Moon Demon Palace because his intents wouldn't disappear, and the weakening of his Emperor intent was considerably slow. Furthermore, Zhao Feng estimated that there would still be a month of 2 before he dropped below the Void God realm. I'll go immediately. I hope that Sir King will not harm Wanner. The elder took a deep breath. He knew that he didn't have any ability to negotiate with a Void God realm king. Whoosh! The elder turned into a streak of light and sped toward the limitless ocean. Zhuang Wanner's face was pale white and filled with helplessness. She didn't know what awaited her, but she knew that her fate was no longer in her control. The elites of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion either surrendered or were killed. A battle that could shake the heavens was stopped by one thought of a king. Zhao Feng wasn't very interested in what happened afterward. My strength has weakened quite a bit. Zhao Feng couldn't help but sigh. Although he still currently had the battle power of an emperor, his soul, true yuan, and bloodline were much weaker than before. Hearing that, the faces of Patriarch Hong, Tianma, and company twitched, and Zhuang Wanner was speechless. It seemed as if Zhao Feng wasn't even at his peak, but he was too lazy to explain. The fading of his strength reminded him clearly of why he was here. He then immediately said goodbye to Patriarch Hong and Tianma. City Lord Lu. Zhao Feng's gaze landed on the flooding Lake City Lord. Zhao Feng took him and Zhuang Wanner toward the direction of the 6 Warlock Tower. On the way, Zhuang Wanner summoned her spiritual pets to take them over. The flooding Lake City Lord looked at Zhao Feng with complicated emotions. He didn't expect the brat he had forced to marry his daughter had now become a legendary figure. This gave him some hope about Lu Qinxin's whereabouts and whether she was alive or not. Several hours later, a 6-sided tower came into sight. An elder sat quietly on the 49th floor of the 6 Warlock Tower when Zhao Feng arrived. Meow! A silver-black big lazy cat appeared at the bottom of the tower and gazed toward the approaching black dot. The guest is here, the sage slowly spoke. It seemed as if he had been waiting. Whoosh! At the same moment, a beast landed. You stay down here. Zhao Feng ordered Zhuang Wanner to stay at the bottom of the tower. Zhuang Wanner felt humiliated. She was a genius at the Origin Core realm and was now just a guard. In reality, Zhao Feng just didn't want Zhuang Wanner to know about some of his secrets. My lord, this way. A female priest from the tower led Zhao Feng up. Meow, meow meow. On the 49th floor, the little thieving cat and the big lazy cat both snickered as they saw each other. The sage's eyes flashed when they landed on Zhao Feng. Cursed words of death. The sage's voice was slow as he spoke each word one at a time. Zhao Feng's eyes lit up. This was the first person he had met after the pursuit of death that could see that he had the cursed words of death on him, and the person even saw it at first glance. Zhao Feng couldn't help but be slightly expectant. It seemed like he had found the right person. If nothing else, the sage at least knew about the cursed words of death. However, when the sage spoke, his expression was solemn. Sage, you seem to know about the cursed words of death? Zhao Feng couldn't help but ask. The sage was silent for a moment as if contemplating. A long time later, his eyes, which seemed to have gone through time, looked toward the sky. The cursed words of death originates from the number 2 race of the 10,000 ancient races, the ancient shaman race, and the price of activating this skill is death. The stronger the user, the more terrifying its power. When the experts of the ancient shaman race used this in the ancient era, even gods with a bloodline of the 10,000 ancient races weren't able to survive. Hearing that, Zhao Feng's heart shook. It seemed as if the cursed words of death was more terrifying than he had expected. Even gods with a 10,000 ancient races bloodline weren't able to survive. No wonder his mystic ice-scaled race bloodline was also weakening. The ancient shaman race is almost completely extinct in the fan universe, but there are still people who research their techniques. Although the power of their skills might not be as strong as when they're used by the ancient shaman race, they're not to be underestimated. Speaking up to the sage looked curiously at Zhao Feng. The Emperor of Death, Zhao Feng said. Emperor of Death, as I thought. In the entire Tsang Ocean, his mastery of the soul has reached the peak, and more importantly, he has the Eye of Death, a powerful item that can enhance the cursed words of death, the sage sighed. Zhao Feng had to admit that the Emperor of Death's mastery of the soul exceeded his by a lot, but unfortunately, he met Zhao Feng's god's spiritual eye, a true god-level eye, and was countered perfectly. If it were any other emperor-level figure, they wouldn't even have been able to defeat the Emperor of Death or chase after him, let alone kill him. Even sacred lords didn't want to offend the Emperor of Death. May I ask the sage, what can I do to resolve the cursed words of death? Zhao Feng's heart clenched. There are a few methods, but most have strict requirements. The sage paused for a moment, and Zhao Feng concentrated on listening. He didn't expect the sage to resolve the cursed words of death himself, but he was known for his wisdom and for his mastery of the Tao of life, entertainment, and charm. Zhao Feng only hoped that the sage could give him some tips and advice. The first way is to find the Eye of Samsara. This eye can counter the cursed words of death to a certain degree. Eye of Samsara, one of the descendants of the 8 great god eyes. Zhao Feng's heart was overjoyed. At least there was some way to resolve the cursed words of death. However, it seemed that only the Eye of Death and the Eye of Destiny had ever appeared in the Tsang Ocean before. The Eye of Samsara had never been seen. Apparently, the Eye of Samsara was the rarest amongst the 8 types. The second method, as everything in the world is balanced, if there are the cursed words of death, there are also the blessed words of death. The sage smiled faintly. Blessed words of death? Zhao Feng instantly understood and spoke. The blessed words of death and the cursed words of death are like water and fire, life and death, polar opposites of each other. That's right. The sage nodded his head. The blessed words of death was the easiest way to resolve the cursed words of death. However, the theory behind the blessed words of death is the same as the cursed words of death. They are both words of death techniques, meaning that they can only be used after one dies. The sage faintly shook his head, and Zhao Feng shook his head in understanding. The blessed words of death also required the user to die, which is why such a skill was so heaven-defying. In other words, the soul strength of the user must be at least on par with the Emperor of Death, and they would have to sacrifice themselves in order to activate the blessed words of death and counter Zhao Feng's cursed words of death. Even if they could find someone willing to do so, there was probably no one in the entire Tsang Ocean who had soul strength on par with the Emperor of Death. The third way is to escape your shell. I think this is the most suitable method for you, and it's actually doable. The sage inspected Zhao Feng. Oh? Flames of hope lit up in Zhao Feng's eyes once more. Escaping your shell will only work if there's some part yourself that is not affected by the cursed words of death, the sage said. Not affected? Zhao Feng instantly understood the theory behind it. He indeed had a part which was not affected. Even though his soul strength was weakening, the god's spiritual eye itself wasn't affected by the cursed words of death. The very center of the blue lake that was connected to the ancient dream realm was completely forbidden. Apart from that, the place where the god tribulation lightning was stored was also unaffected by the cursed words of death. Let the non-affected part survive while the other parts die to the cursed words of death. This is escaping from your shell. Only a small number of unique existences can use this method. I believe that you, who has the 9th god's eye, can try to do this. The sage smiled and said. The 3 methods above were the sage's advice. The first 2 required outside help, while Zhao Feng could try the third by himself. The third method involves stealing another body like the Emperor of Death, but it's extremely dangerous, and I would have to give up my bloodline and cultivation. Zhao Feng sighed. The most perfect method would be the second, the blessed words of death. This could get rid of the cursed words of death completely without him losing anything, but at the same time, this method had the strictest requirements. However, no matter what, Zhao Feng at least had some options to choose from, and he knew far more than he did before. Thank you for your advice. Zhao Feng was extremely grateful. Others wouldn't know so much. Little friend is being too serious. The sage shook his head bitterly. You have the ninth god's eye as well as limitless potential. If it weren't for you, Xianxia wouldn't have been able to change her destiny, and she would have died before 16 years old. Xianxia, Zhao Feng's and the flooding Lake City Lord's hearts jumped as they started to discuss the second reason they were here. Zhao Feng immediately told the sage his experience in the Fan Luan Ancient Sound Palace. If my calculations are correct, Xianxia has had new life for 8 years now. Relief appeared on the sage's face. Hearing that, Zhao Feng started to faintly understand what new life was. You should have already met someone with new life, but that person wasn't able to comprehend the fate of Fan Luan and change their destiny. The sage's voice was mysterious. He had met such a person before? Zhao Feng couldn't remember who it was. Sage, can you tell me the whereabouts of Xianxia? The flooding Lake City Lord couldn't help but ask. Zhao Feng also wanted to know her location. Zhao Feng, if it's meant to be, you will see Lu Xianxia again. If you want to find her whereabouts, you need to find the Eye of Samsara. The sage's smile became wider. Zhao Feng felt as if the sage knew a lot more but didn't want to tell him. The Eye of Samsara again? Zhao Feng couldn't help but be speechless when he thought about this descendant of one of the 8 great god eyes. The Eye of Samsara appeared once in the continent zone dozens of millennia ago, the sage said. Continent zone? Zhao Feng murmured. He knew that he would definitely go there sometime. In the 6th Warlock Tower, Zhao Feng was dazed for a moment before saying goodbye to the sage. He felt that the sage was filled with mysteriousness, and he couldn't see through him. On the 49th floor, the sage sent Zhao Feng away with his eyes. Meow! The big lazy cat yawned. A measly azure flower continent is filled with such fortune. But this isn't the center of life, the sage murmured. Later that day, the sage dispersed the 6th Warlock Tower and left with the big lazy cat. From then onward, the sage became a legend. He never returned, but his mysteriousness left a mark in the history of the Azure Flower continent. Half a month after the sage left, an elder from the Scarlet Moon demonic religion led a group of elites and arrived at the 6th Warlock Tower, but it was empty, as expected of the sage. I came here under orders from the Patriarch to capture him alive, but the elder stood on the tower for a long time before leaving. However, just as they had traveled several hundred miles, whoosh! A bright orange glow of light flew in from the limitless ocean and radiated an aura that made others unable to breathe. The newcomer was a youth with black hair, and his eyes were like dark skies. His every action contained unrivaled intent and belief. Who is it? The elder met the youth very soon. This person looks slightly familiar. It's him, Yu Tianhao, one of the overwhelming prodigies from the last sacred true dragon gathering. Some elites from the Scarlet Moon demonic religion cried. Spawn of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion? I'll finish them off then. Yu Tianhao smiled as he slowly raised his palm, and an orange-colored light engulfed everything within several miles. Arg! The several dozen elites of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion, including the elder, turned into dust. In just one move, he destroyed these experts of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion, including a sovereign. Zhao Feng, I feel your aura has been here recently. Yu Tianhao stood still as his black hair blew in the wind. With his unparalleled heaven-battling bloodline and his instinct, he looked toward a certain direction. Following the direction and passing through space was a faraway place in the northern continent, the 13 countries. At this moment in time, Zhao Feng was in the 13 countries. In the Cloud Country, Zhao Feng floated in the air above the top of Sky Moon Mountain and gazed down at the Broken Moon clan. This scene made him feel peaceful and calm. There were still many familiar faces even after so many years. Back then, they were disciples at the very bottom of the clan, but now they were of part of the middle upper echelon. Zhao Feng saw Lin Fan, who was once the number 1 outer disciple, and he was now a vice-division leader at the half-step True Spirit realm. The once shy Ran Xiaoyuan had become an elder. Yang Qingshan and Nan Gongfan, the other disciples of Lord Guanjuan, had now become regulators. The overall strength of the Broken Moon clan was now comparable to a half-star power. and there were more than 20 true spirit realm elders or division leaders. In a corner of the Broken Moon clan, a male was drunk, but no one in the 13 countries dared to underestimate him. He was the True Lord rank expert guarding the Broken Moon clan, True Lord Taishao. The other True Lord rank in the Broken Moon clan was Lin Tong, who had the heavenly absent eyes. These two True Lord ranks had been either enslaved by Zhao Feng or had to sign a blood contract. In reality, the two of them both felt something when Zhao Feng returned to the Azure Flower continent. Lin Tong's senses came from his dark heart seed, while True Lord Tiexiao's senses came from the blood contract. Junior Martial Brother Zhao. The voice of a male sounded from nearby. This newcomer was the clan master of the Broken Moon clan, and he was famed across the 13 countries. Senior Martial Brother Yang. Zhao Feng smiled faintly. He and Yang Gan were both disciples of First Elder, and they had a relatively better relationship than some of the other people in the clan. Junior Martial Brother Zhao, you seem to be different after coming back this time, Yang Gan said in a weird tone. The impression of Zhao Feng in his mind was that Zhao Feng spent every minute cultivating, but Zhao Feng had been here for more than 10 days and yet acted very peacefully. Zhao Feng had never cultivated after returning, and looking at his sick face, he seemed more like a diseased person returning to their home. Zhao Feng smiled but didn't explain anything. He and Yang Gan just walked around the Broken Moon clan. Greetings, clan master. Some of the members or disciples of the clan bowed on the way, and some of the newer disciples who didn't know Zhao Feng inspected him with curiosity. The eyes of the old people who knew Zhao Feng were filled with respect and admiration that far exceeded their respect for Yang Gan. Zhao Feng saw old Zhang and old Guan on the way and played chess with them while also talking about the past. The two still felt regretful that Zhao Feng didn't go down the path of creating pills or constructing arrays. At night, Zhao Feng and Yang Gan arrived at First Elder's place. The arm that First Elder had lost was replaced by a silver-green metallic arm, the Wheel of Light and Darkness, that Zhao Feng brought back last time. Now that First Elder was only half a step away from the True Lord rank, with this Wheel of Light and Darkness, he could fight against those at the True Lord rank. Zhao Feng didn't think about raising the cultivation of his friends and family. The path of cultivation was tiresome and dangerous, and not everyone was suited to enter the outside world. Sometimes, being a frog at the bottom of a well was a blessing. Of course, he brought his two masters and parents the same present for each of them, Immortal Springs wine. The Immortal Springs wine could increase one's lifespan by 1,000 years, and with the help of the Immortal Springs wine, the lifespan of First Elder and company would exceed those at the Origin Core realm. Fenger, the Cloud Country isn't really affected by the Scarlet Moon demonic religion's rise, but I hope you can do your part to stop them, First Elder spoke. Just based on the fact that Zhao Feng could bring back something like the Immortal Springs wine, he must have reached an unimaginable level. Master, don't worry. I've already sent my slave to take over the Scarlet Moon demonic religion. Zhao Feng took a sip of top-tier alcohol from the outside world. Meow meow. The little thieving cat also hugged the bottle and seemed to be somewhat drunk. First Elder and Yang Gan looked at each other with shock. Just a slave of Zhao Feng's was able to take over the Scarlet Moon demonic religion? However, they knew that Zhao Feng wasn't arrogant. Maybe the Scarlet Moon demonic religion didn't even have the right for Zhao Feng to act personally. On the second day, Zhao Feng left the Broken Moon clan and met up with Old Su from the Dragon Killing Alliance. Although the 13 countries was a backwater area, their overall strength was not to be underestimated. Amongst them, the Dragon Killing Alliance controlled the territories of the two strong countries of the past, but their main headquarters was in the Cloud Country. Zhao Feng understood how the Scarlet Moon demonic religion affected the Cloud Country from Old Su. Since the Cloud Country was poor and far away, the Scarlet Moon demonic religion didn't really care about it, especially since the Skeletal Division leaders' forces had already been cleared out by Zhao Feng in the past, so it was considerably peaceful. There would be the occasional person, but they would be killed by the Dragon Killing Alliance. For the next couple days, Zhao Feng accompanied his parents and Lord Guanjuan. Everyone that knew Zhao Feng felt weird. When did this cultivation maniac become so relaxed? The last of my time has been spent with my master, parents, martial brothers and sisters and friends. Zhao Feng gazed toward the sky in the darkness. After finishing everything here, Zhao Feng would go to the continent zone, and everything in the Azure Flower continent would become further and further away from him. Before he did so, Zhao Feng wanted to accompany those that he grew up with. In the blink of an eye, he had stayed here for a month or two. Zhao Feng traveled across the 13 countries, but he mainly just went to the places where he had important memories. In this period of time, he even went to Sun Feather City and Green Leaf Village. He also used a unique method to enter the Floating Crest Palace. Floating Crest Palace. This inheritance was no longer in Zhao Feng's eyes. The little thieving cat told Zhao Feng to go to the place where he found the egg and cloak. There was still a small amount of treasures here that were relatively rare for sovereigns, and Zhao Feng guessed that the owner was at least a half-step king. Looks like the little thieving cat hatching from an egg was just a coincidence, Zhao Feng murmured. The owner of the Floating Crest Palace loved to collect items, and anything made from special materials or that were unable to be appraised were also put into his collection. There were many nice collectibles here, but Zhao Feng didn't take any of them. On the contrary, he even added some treasures to the Floating Crest Palace. Some of the spoils of war from sovereigns and kings of the outside world weren't very useful for Zhao Feng, so he just left them in the Floating Crest Palace. On this day, Zhao Feng was lying on a hill in the Broken Moon clan when he suddenly sensed something. Zhao Feng sensed several king auras descend to the Azure Flower continent before quickly fading away. Hehe, they're finally here? Zhao Feng laughed lightly as his relaxed expression faded. Whoosh! Zhao Feng's figure flashed and disappeared from the Broken Moon clan. A while later, Zhao Feng found the charming girl in red, Xianxia. Zhao Feng, the Grand Elder of the Moon Demon Palace, has arrived at the Azure Flower continent and would like to talk to you. Xianxia held a communication token and said carefully, "Oh, just to talk? Does the Moon Demon Palace bring 3 kings just to talk?" Zhao Feng smiled, and Xianxia was instantly speechless. The Moon Demon Palace only had one Void God Realm king. If they just wanted to talk peacefully and truthfully, then the Moon Demon Palace wouldn't invite the Void God Realm kings of the other forces. Xianxia glanced at Zhao Feng sneakily and found that he was still casual. The Grand Elder is currently at the Sacred Alliance, Xianxia added. Okay. Zhao Feng said goodbye to those in the Cloud Country without hesitation and left with Xianxia. When they passed through the Canopy Great Country, Zhao Feng found that the situation of the Azure Flower continent had changed dramatically. The Skeletal Division leader had taken over a large number of elites from the Scarlet Moon demonic religion and killed all those who didn't obey him. Through the Dark Heart Seed, Zhao Feng knew that the Skeletal Division leader had taken over the Scarlet Moon demonic religion forces in the western and southern continents and was currently attacking toward the center continent, fighting with the forces of the main headquarters of the Scarlet Moon demonic religion. Nothing was able to withstand the Ghost Corp's cursed array. The Skeletal Division leader only used a little more than a dozen cursed ghost corpses and was still able to overtake the Azure Flower continent. At this point in time, under the attacks of the Sacred Alliance and the Skeletal Division leader, the Scarlet Moon demonic religion was retreating. Apart from the location of their patriarch being unknown, the Scarlet Moon demonic religion was almost completely destroyed. On this day, Zhao Feng arrived in the center continent in the Sacred Alliance. Zhao Feng could feel many powerful auras from far away. The strongest ones among them were 3 king auras, and the remaining auras were all Origin Core Realm experts of the 10 great clans. Inside a big hall, reporting to Grand Elder, Zhao Feng and Xianxia have arrived. The Elder with the blood moon on his robes messaged and bowed. In the very center of the hall wasn't the Palace Lord of the Sacred Alliance or their core members, but 3 glows of magnificent power. The very left glow was a golden skeleton, and the very right glow was a demonic Tao expert surrounded in black. At the very middle was a pure female who seemed to be a goddess, and her aura suppressed the other 2 kings. These 3 magnificent existences made the entire Sacred Alliance become dead silent, and the heaven-earth yuan qi in this area seemed to have frozen. Below them were some of the upper echelon members of the Sacred Alliance, including the Deputy Palace Lord, Sovereign Yu Xingqian, and Baiyun Dao. However, none of these sovereigns dared to even breathe loudly, and they were full of fear. These 3 kings came from the Tianlu Islands, but they were now here for some reason. What did Zhao Feng do for 3 kings to come? The upper echelon of the Sacred Alliance was uneasy. Behind Sovereign Yu Xingqian stood a male with black hair, and his eyes were like stars. Dissatisfaction and anger appeared on Yu Tianhao's face as the magnificent pressure of a king bore down on him. But he was stopped by his father. Howard, don't be rash. Just the thought of any one of these 3 kings can determine whether the Azure Flower continent lives or dies. The magnificent power of the 3 kings made the hall go dead silent. The upper echelon of the Sacred Alliance was all sovereigns of the Azure Flower continent, and many of them came from the 10 great clans, but none of them dared to even breathe loudly at the moment. 3 Void God Realm kings had descended upon the Azure Flower continent, and behind them were powerful 2-star sections. All of this was because Zhao Feng had kidnapped one of the Moon Demon Palace's peerless prodigies, who was a descendant of the Grand Elder. The 3 kings sat at the front of the hall. No one could see what they looked like. They were waiting quietly and didn't purposely release their aura, but the atmosphere was solemn. Around half the time it took to make tea later, the sound of flying appeared, and a male and female landed in the hall several breaths later. They were respectively a sick purple-haired youth and a charming girl. Zhao Feng, the upper echelon of the Sacred Alliance, exclaimed. The male and female walked steadily into the hall. Zhao Feng walked very confidently, whereas Zhuang Wanner was slightly uneasy, but she let out a breath when she saw the 3 kings. However, she still didn't dare to do anything. Zhuang Wanner knew very clearly that Zhao Feng had sensed the 3 king auras long ago, and yet he still came. She wouldn't believe it if Zhao Feng had nothing to rely on. Zhao Feng, we finally meet. A beautiful voice sounded from the middle king. It was a female who was pure and holy. Her every action seemed to come from a goddess. Saint Moon Ant Goddess? Zhao Feng looked at the female and said emotionlessly. The female he looked at made him remember Yi Yanyu from the Purple Saint Ruins. Yi Yanyu was the Saint Moon Ant Goddess disciple, and he had seen her image when Yi Yanyu used the Void God protection. Within the Great Hall, Zhao Feng's exchange with the Saint Moon Ant Goddess caused chaos. The gazes of the two locked onto each other for a sharp instant. Zhao Feng's gaze was sharp and seemed to have the ability to see through one's soul, whereas the Saint Moon Ant Goddess was calm. Unexpectedly, when the 3 kings saw Zhao Feng, they didn't immediately trouble him or attack. The exchange between the 2 sides was much calmer than they had expected, as if they were friends that hadn't seen each other for several years. Zhuang Wanner even stood behind Zhao Feng. This atmosphere was very weird. The upper echelons of the Sacred Alliance all looked at each other and had their own guesses. It wasn't hard to see that the 3 kings were wary of Zhao Feng. Could the rumor be true? Had Zhao Feng become a king? But even if he had, he was facing 3 older kings with 2-star sects behind them. Zhao Feng should still be the one at a disadvantage. Zhao Feng! The expression of the demonic Dao King was grim. I heard that you kidnapped a core disciple of mine and even threatened to destroy the Moon Demon Palace. The atmosphere instantly became tense. The king of the demonic Dao wore an old black armor and had a scarlet-black curved moon symbol on his forehead. A magnificent power of the demonic Dao covered the hall, and the hearts of all the upper echelons from the Sacred Alliance jumped. That's right, I said that. I hope that you will give me a good explanation as to why your sect is contaminating the Azure Flower continent. Zhao Feng stood with his hands behind his back and slowly walked around. Junior, don't think that, just because you've become a king, the Moon Demon Palace will be scared of you, the demonic Dao King roared. Zhe, what arrogance! The golden skeleton of the Black Cliff Palace laughed weirdly. Only the Saint Moon Ant Goddess in the middle was calm, and she stopped the other 2 kings from being enraged. Zhao Feng remained calm, but there was a coldness in his eyes. Zhao Feng, the Saint Moon Ant Goddess spoke. We know that you are the disciple of Emperor Duanmu, but he's already left the Tsang Ocean. Hearing that, the people broke out into chaos once more and were stunned. They didn't expect Zhao Feng to be an emperor's disciple. Even if a new king like you isn't scared of 3 2-star sects, the Azure Flower continent is innocent. The Saint Ant Moon Goddess had a faint smile, but the power contained within her tone moved Zhao Feng's heart. Amongst the 3 kings, she was the most troublesome. She was a peak-tier king, and as a 2.5-star sect, the Pure Moon spiritual sect definitely had more than one king. Are you threatening me? Looks like the lesson master gave you all wasn't enough. Zhao Feng's expression turned cold, and the expressions of the three kings changed. They didn't expect Zhao Feng to be so forceful, but Emperor Duanmu had indeed taught them a lesson. Zhao Feng, don't drink the wine of punishment instead of the wine of respect. Hand Zhuang water over and we won't harm anyone present. The demonic Dao expert said in a deep tone, and the gazes of the three kings locked on to Zhao Feng. All of the upper echelon members of the Sacred Alliance were surprised and happy. The kings were actually negotiating with Zhao Feng. If one Zhuang water could be traded for their safety, it was worth it. Are you still threatening me? Zhao Feng's face dropped as his purple hair started to blow, and a cold intent started to spread across the hall. Even the three kings felt uneasy. They glanced at each other with solemn expressions. Firstly, they remembered how strong Emperor Duanmu was. Secondly, they couldn't see through the current Zhao Feng. They had witnessed Zhao Feng's eye bloodline before. They had seen him kill Origin Core Realm experts when he was only at the True Lord rank. Even the pursuit of death hadn't taken his life, but news of Zhao Feng killing the Emperor of Death hadn't spread here yet. Only a small number of people in the true martial spiritual zone knew. If this wasn't the case, then the three kings wouldn't even have the courage to negotiate. Zhao Feng, as long as you hand over Zhuang Waner, we promise we won't touch the Azure Flower continent in the future. The Saint Moon Ant Goddess took a step back, and the other two kings suppressed their anger. Zhao Feng, agree to the three kings. Some sovereigns in the Sacred Alliance couldn't help but say, Zhao Feng, don't be rash. You can't take the existence of the Azure Flower continent as a joke, Sovereign Baiyun Dao said. Zhao Feng's gaze swept across the upper echelon of the Sacred Alliance, and it slightly lingered on Yu Tianhao for a while. For the Sacred Alliance, the three kings negotiating was already taking a big step back, and Zhao Feng was forceful from the beginning. For a prodigy to do this, it was enough to be recorded in the history of the Azure Flower continent. Okay, I will accept that deal. Zhao Feng thought for a while before agreeing, then sent Zhuang Waner to the three kings with a wave of magnificent power. The three kings were slightly surprised. They didn't expect Zhao Feng to agree so quickly. They nodded their heads and let the upper echelon of the Sacred Alliance out of the hall. But Zhao Feng remained standing still, and he looked at the king of the demonic Dao until his hair stood up. Zhao Feng, are you going to go back on your promise? The king of the demonic Dao said loudly. Hehe. Go back on my promise? The deal is already complete. I gave Zhuang Waner to you, Zhao Feng said as a playful smile appeared on his face. You? The three kings all paused, and the hearts of the upper echelon who had just left the hall went cold. Was Zhao Feng going to do something else? Everyone, retreat. The upper echelon of the Sacred Alliance quickly flew away. They were scared they were going to be swept into a fight between kings. Only one person stayed behind, and that person turned around and stood next to Zhao Feng. However, Yu Xingqian's expression changed dramatically, but he could do nothing to stop him. Only two prodigies and three kings were left behind in the hall. Boom! The release of magnificent power turned the hall into shambles, and the shockwave sent the upper echelon quickly retreating, but they couldn't help looking back. Three glows of magnificent power floated in mid-air, and they were all enraged. Yu Tianhao. Zhao Feng didn't bother with the three kings and instead looked at Yu Tianhao. Zhao Feng, don't think of me as dragging you down. I can handle one king without too much trouble. Yu Tianhao said emotionlessly and radiated a half-step king intent as his unparalleled heaven-battling bloodline opened, causing his battle intent to reach the level of a void god realm king. Zhao Feng, what do you want? The Saint Ant Moon Goddess said unhappily. I already said that the Moon Demon Palace has to give the Azure Flower continent an explanation or else the Moon Demon Palace shall be removed from the Tsang Ocean. Zhao Feng's tone became colder and colder. Zhao Feng, don't get cocky. The king of the demonic Dao roared as his magnificent power crushed toward Zhao Feng. The sky seemed to be dyed with scarlet-black flames, and a chaotic spatial dimension started to appear. Humph! Zhao Feng snickered coldly as his intent passed through heaven and earth. Boom! The magnificent power that the demonic Tao King had formed acted as if it was hit by tribulation lightning and was instantly destroyed. An unrivaled intent that seemed to rule the sky smashed toward the king of the demonic Tao. Wah! The king of the demonic Tao instantly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face went white. Emperor Intent! The Saint Ant Moon Goddess and Golden Skeleton exclaimed. Zhao Feng then took a step forward and slowly raised his hand. Bam! Boom! Boom! The heavens seemed to shake as a terrifying wave of lightning could be faintly seen through the air. The aura of immortal and undying god tribulation lightning made the souls of the three kings tremble. Plop! The demonic Tao King of the Moon Demon Palace fell from the sky and knelt on the ground. Emperor Zhao Feng, please forgive us. In an instant, the Saint Ant Moon Goddess and company seemed to fall into an abyss and started to beg.